But that's where we are today. We have to hear the truth, hear the evidence, hear the testimony, and get to the bottom of the truth. Thank you very much.
Hey guys, we're here in Arizona for the second state legislature hearing.
Thank you, Senator. Leo Biasucci, I represent District 5, which includes Mojave County, La Paz County, everywhere from Lake Havasu City, Kingman, Bullhead, Parker. And, I think all of us can share the same story that we've been receiving thousands of emails a day from constituents. And they want answers, and rightfully so. And this is our job now, is to provide them with whatever evidence that's being presented here today and allowing the people to decide for themselves if they feel our elections were secure and if there was any kind of fraud at all. That's our job as representatives, to give those answers to the people and let them figure it out. So I'm honored to be here on this panel. I'm honored to represent the state of Arizona and District 5, and I look forward to the mayor and the legal team to present what you guys have today. Thank you.
Representative. Senator Allen.
Thank you very much. I'm Sylvia Allen. I represent District 6, which is the rural heart of Arizona, the most beautiful part of the state, you guys. And I've been so honored to be able to represent this district. It's Navajo County, it's Gila County, it's Yavapai County, Coconino County, all the way to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. So I'm here representing 4 counties. And I have also received hundreds and hundreds of emails from citizens not only in my district but all across the state saying, please, Senator Allen, please listen to what is out there, the testimony that's out there, the different evidence that's being gathered. Please be sure that my vote counted. Please be sure that our elections are safe. And also, as I read the U.S. Constitution, and 10 times I've taken an oath as a political leader to uphold the Constitution of the United States and also our state constitution. What does that really mean? The legislature is the people's house. This is the people's part of government, and it's important that we protect our right to vote. And the legislature, under the Constitution, we're responsible to be sure that our electors that we send from the state to the Electoral College, that we have sent it when we've had an election that has been fair and correct and legal. So I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you to everyone that's worked so hard to put this together. And I am hoping that what we learned today, we'll pay attention, you guys, and that we will go forward and we'll be sure that we can correct the problems that have taken place. Thank you.
I'm Senator David Gowan. I'm from Legislative District 14, the rural Arizona. I mean, we're actually the heart of rural Arizona.
No.
Right, sorry, Sylvia. Actually, so I represent Cochise counties, Graham, Greenlee, and East Pima, actually. So I got a little bit of Pima in there. Anybody from that region? So where's my clapping? I mean, I heard the clapping for the others. There we go. Thank you. I want to thank Mayor Giuliani for coming in and with his team and preparing to show us some evidence of what might be going on out there with fraud. And hopefully this leads to something big here that we see coming up, either by fixing something or actually allowing us to go in and see the issues at hand so we can actually fix what's going on. That's what we are as a legislature. We're your body, right? So we are what you would consider closest to the people. And through that, we need to be able to do the process that allows the people to be confident in their elections. So that's why I'm proud to be here, and I'm happy that we've been invited to this and willing to listen and learn. So thank you.
I'm Sonny Borelli. I'm the Senate Majority Whip. My legislative district is District 5. I represent Mojave and La Paz County, which represents 3/4 of the west coast of Arizona, away from the left coast. So yes, and I can see California from my house. But my colleagues, their comments, I can't say more than other than we are here for clarity and transparency, and I'm Sonny Borelli, and I approve their messages. Thank you.
Facts are stubborn things. They're barriers for deceit to overcome. The purpose of this public hearing, an inquiry into the integrity of the election just passed, is to provide a forum where no others have been permitted for the President's litigation team to present the evidence and testimony that questions of integrity arise out of the 2020 election. We are caught between the desire to trust the process and the suspicion that it has failed the people of Arizona and potentially the people of our sister states. If there is voter disenfranchisement, we must identify its source and eradicate it as we would with any disease. Much has been made of the lack of formality of this hearing and that it is not being held in the House or the Senate hearing room, or that there are not sworn witnesses, or even that there is potential for hearsay to be portrayed as legitimate testimony. The members on this panel were not elected to appoint or appointed by other officials, but by our constituents, to whom we are ultimately accountable, each one of us, ultimately accountable, under our Republican form of government. The goal of this hearing is to provide an objective forum for constituents to hear testimony and see evidence that supports or refutes allegations that the 2020 general election is legitimate or illegitimate. After all, we still live under a form of government that is dependent upon the consent of the governed. Under Article 2, Section 1, quote, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. And under Article 6, the Constitution, the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all the treaties made, which shall be made under that authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. And finally, under Article 4, Section 4, the Guarantee Clause, we are all guaranteed, each state, a Republican form of government, the foundation of which is self-governance, through free and fair elections accurately reflecting the will of the people. We are not here to do anything more than to receive facts as witnesses know them through testimony and evidence. We are not here to judge the people making the decisions that lead to the facts provided as evidence. There are some who demand that witnesses swear an oath and others who may dismiss the testimony presented. In the end, the people of the state of Arizona demand, and frankly, are entitled to know whether their trust has been violated and if they should seek redress for their grievances in the legislature or the courts. From the material presented in this inquiry, I expect that the panel will generate from the consumption of the House and Senate for the consumption of the House and Senate membership, and as matter of public record, a report on the proceedings and a video archive that may be used as evidence of this proceeding. With that, Mayor Giuliani, please proceed.
Representative Fincham, distinguished senators and representatives, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to be heard. It's been difficult getting an opportunity to be heard. It shouldn't be. It's America after all. And our side of the story is legitimate. Our side of the story needs to be heard. And it's been uniformly censored by big tech, big media, the crooked Democrats, and basically people who are saying, don't show us the facts. We've decided already that this is a free and fair election. It was done perfectly. Please don't interrupt that narrative with the truth. Well, we're going to interrupt that narrative this morning with the truth. I have with me Jenna Ellis, who's my co-counsel representing the President of the United States, and others on our team who have helped put this together. They'll be testifying. And again, I want to thank you for your courage in doing this. I don't think most people realize the kind of harassment, threats, horrible things that are said to you and your family because you're doing this. And again, I emphasize, we've let something really go wrong in this country when that happens. Some of you are old enough and some of you are not old enough to remember the McCarthy era. Well, I call this the McCarthy era on steroids. People being actually fired from their jobs. We had a lawyer who was handling one of our major cases. His very distinguished law firm, can't be really much of a law firm, said that he couldn't remain with his law firm if he represented the President of the United States. If that isn't censorship, if that isn't a form of despotism and distortion of the values of our country, I don't know what is. It started before. It's been going on for some time, like that kind of despotism and authoritarianism. It always starts slowly. You could see it in things done 10, 12 years ago. I think the pandemic released the tendencies of left-wing, socialist-leaning, socialist governors, congressmen, senators, to move to where socialism always moves to. In the history of socialism, which is an old idea, not a new idea, authoritarianism is always the end result. Because when the government controls property, the government controls. And it doesn't want to be interrupted by the stupid ideas of the dumb people of the country. The elite know better. Boy, doesn't that sound like America today? I mean, that was Russia, that was China, that is China. That was Poland, that was Bulgaria, that was East Berlin. Gosh, I thought we fought that and got rid of it. Never thought I'd see it in America. It's in America. It began with the revelation of the hard drive that proves substantial, major crimes on behalf of the Biden family. Censored, not allowed to be shown, not allowed on television, not allowed in the newspapers. Just, we don't want to see the facts, even though they may point out millions and millions of dollars going to a vice president from China, Russia, Ukraine, Romania. Oh, I can't remember all the places. Highly unusual for a vice president to become a multimillionaire while he's sitting in the office of vice president. But it happened, and he's the candidate of the Democratic Party right now. That was covered up. As soon as this election moved into the questionable stage, same practice was used. Cover it up, cover it up, cover it up. Big tech, big media, crooked Democratic leaders, big business that profits from the system the way it operates right now. Their desire is to make country not America first, but wherever America should be put so they can make a profit. We could be third, we could be fifth, we could be non-existent as long as they're making a profit. They have no sense of how important this country is to the, really, to the survival of the world as a decent place. There is no other country that puts its men and women's lives at risk to save other people. That country doesn't exist on earth. It's us. And if we destroy the essential nature of this country, the world's in for a terrible period of time. Well, specifically to this election was the subject of a conspiracy that goes back before the election. A conspiracy that was hatched by the crooked leaders of the Democratic Party. And let me say this to all Democrats. 99% of Democrats are just as honest, just as good, just as decent as Republicans. They may not be as correct on the policies, but we can forgive that. Some of my best friends and relatives are Democrats, and they're not correct on the policies. They believe the same thing about me. But they don't cheat, they don't steal votes, they don't sell public office. The very, very top of the Democratic Party has been corrupted badly since Clinton, and it's carrying itself through, and it hasn't been exercised. The head hasn't been cut off yet of that corruption. This conspiracy isn't limited to, but as you hear the testimony, I think you'll figure it out, just like the people in Pennsylvania, and later in the week, the people in Michigan. It centers around the mail-in ballots and the absentee ballots. We've been warned for 20 years that going to major mail-in ballots as a way of doing our elections will be fraught with tremendous fraud. They're very dangerous. It's almost impossible for even semi-crooked politicians to resist the temptation to use it for ballot stuffing. We were warned by President Jimmy Carter. We were warned by former Secretary of State Jim Baker in a report, very, very consequential report. They said we should never do it. And if we do it, it should be extremely limited to the real absentee situations like we have done in the past. We were warned by Justice Souter in the Supreme Court, warned by many, many experts, Republican and Democrat. Democrats used to be against mail-in ballots, like they were against everything else until President Trump was for it, which gives you a sense they're not thinking about the country. They're thinking about competitive advantage, getting their power back, serving their greed and for power and money. So when they saw the mail-in ballot situation, they said, wow, we could change an election in the past, Mayor Daley, like they did in Florida or tried to do just last year in Florida by turning the votes in Broward and Palm Beach County, holding them back for 2 weeks and seeing if they could get enough absentee ballots made up. They couldn't get there. They couldn't get there because there were only like 300,000 or 400,000 absentee ballots. You can't expand it to 1 million. But when you have 2.5 million mail-in ballots, you can expand it to 3 million or 3.2 million. Or you can count it 4 or 5 times in the machine. There's plenty of room for cheating, which is why they slowed it down. So you're in it with other states. It's not just Arizona that has been conned, and the people of Arizona taken advantage of, and their right to vote taken away from them. It's the people of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona that we know of. And if your right to vote has been taken away, so is mine. We have an illegitimate election. We have demonstrably wrong numbers in those states. In your state, a lot of the fraud had to do with the mail-in system, as it did in other places. Your state's a little bit different than Michigan and Pennsylvania. Your state, it wasn't full and complete shutout of all Republicans in seeing mail-in ballots and ballots that were in dispute. But it was significant. A significant number of these witnesses were shut out when the important determination was being made, is this ballot valid or isn't it? When you make that determination, as a matter of law in almost every state in the country, and just as a matter of due process and fairness, we'd all agree both parties should get to see it. That's the last time you get to check the validity of the ballot. That's why mail-in ballots are different. We can go back to the machines and we can study the machines. Maybe we can pick up the fraud and the evidence of it, because there's traces left in it. But once the envelope is separated from the ballot, gone forever, you will never know how to connect the fraud, which is why President Carter and Jimmy Baker said it's a field day for fraud. The way you accomplish the fraud is you don't have an independent party or a Republican. If you're going to cheat the Republicans, you don't have him in the room so he can object to it and point it out. Look, this is the same handwriting on 12 ballots. Oh, they didn't fill out the envelope. They just filled out the ballot. Or this seems like it was done by a machine. Those are the things you can object to. So in probably at least 100,000 situations in Maricopa County alone, and Pima, you did not have the opportunity to do that. Those votes should be declared null and void. You also, in addition, however, had your own variations, as the other states did. So the key fraud is the mail-in ballot. That was the backup in case they fell too far behind. That's why they cut off the vote at midnight, 1 o'clock, when President Trump was getting too far ahead, particularly in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, and also in Pennsylvania. So they cut off the vote. He was getting up to 800,000 in Pennsylvania, 300,000 in Michigan. He was even further ahead in Wisconsin. They cut off the vote. They turned things off. They chased everybody out. And then it's not your concern, except for the fact that you got to look at this somewhat in total. They started bringing in false ballots. We have 3 witnesses to 100,000 of those ballots being brought in at 4:30 in the morning in Detroit, with no Republicans around that they knew of. Luckily, we had 2 that stayed behind and a Dominion employee who was willing to be honest. Not all of them are honest. So the point of that is you're part of this fraud. You also had numerous situations of your workers, your citizens, observing the poll officials helping people vote to the point of telling them who to vote for. Clear fraud. You have situations of poll workers being observed changing votes, taking ambiguous votes and making sure they were cast for Biden. And you have situations of stuffing the ballot box. And we will try to quantify those. Those are harder to quantify. But the ones involving the exclusion of observers are quantifiable, and that's 100,000. So let me spend just 1 minute, and then we'll get our witnesses out, on Dominion. Dominion is a foreign company. It's a Canadian company. It has an office in America, but it's a foreign company. Question number 1. I have to believe the people of Arizona had no idea a foreign company was counting their vote. I guarantee you they didn't, because the people in New York did. I didn't. I find that outrageous. We can't get an American company that we have complete jurisdiction over to count our votes. Now, did we pick this company here in Arizona without any due diligence? It's not just a foreign company. It's a foreign company that's been in a lot of trouble. In Texas, it was excluded after 2 years of study for being exceedingly incompetent. It screwed up elections in the past. It's well known for having the most porous system of all the companies, meaning it's the easiest one to penetrate. They do little or nothing to protect against hacking. They even explain to some extent in their manual how to get into them, how to manipulate them. And then they have a history going back to the Smartmatic company that actually was formed for the purpose of fixing elections. I don't know who makes the choice in your state of who should be counting your votes, but I know that person either is exceedingly naive or much worse.
Much worse.
If this wasn't known to the person making the choice, then you got to change the whole system. Finally, you don't have to wait to change your system. We don't have to endure a phony election and the biggest voter fraud in our history and end up with a tainted election and go down in history as a country that didn't have the courage to deal with it. Go down as the first group of Americans that didn't have the courage to stand up when their freedoms were being taken away. We'd be the first. When I see some of these leaders cower at the idea of doing what the Constitution gives them the power to do, I become very discouraged about, can we really stand up to this invasion on what's been really an invasion on our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, and now our right to a fair and honest count? That's all we want. I mean, the one thing you will come away with here is the vote as it presently exists is false. It's fraudulent. If they certify it, they are certifying a false statement to the United States of America. Gosh, when I was a prosecutor, that was a federal crime. False statement to the United States in probably the most important matter we have, the selection of our commander-in-chief. I mean, I can tell you where the false statements and where the numbers end up, but that doesn't even matter. It is clear that the numbers are false. It's clear that you have included ballots that weren't properly inspected. It's clear that you're including ballots that were voted by other people. It's clear that you're using machines that have been shown to be totally manipulated in other places, and you won't give us the opportunity to examine those machines. I think anybody who puts their name on that is getting very close to committing a crime. And I think anyone who stands by and lets it happen, maybe they're not committing a crime, but they've lost the sense of what it means that we have to fight to protect our values and our rights, because there are always people, both externally and internally, who want to take them away. And I'm going to ask you to fight. And I'm going to ask you to try to implore the other members of your legislature to stand up to this. Do not be bullied. Do not be frightened. Your political career is worth losing if you can save the right to vote in America. In fact, I may get you a... In fact, I can get you a chapter in Profiles in Courage if you do that. Because at times in our history, certain men and women have stepped forward and lost their political career to give us the rights that we have. It's very, very, very similar to losing your life on the battlefield. But that's really what's required right now. Under the Constitution, and we are going to give all of you the memorandum from Professor Eastman, very short and very direct, and you can just go to the third page. It makes it very clear that under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the document that guides us, we're not guided by your governor. We're not guided by your Secretary of State. We're not guided by Joe Biden. We're not guided by the New York Times. And we're not guided by all those stations that call the election. You know what we're guided by? The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States says that you, the legislature of Arizona, have the plenary power to regulate the selection of electors in a presidential election. The Supreme Court, in the case that you will see cited there in McPherson, has already answered the question that many ignorant talking heads who really shouldn't be representing anyone because they're incompetent, on television they say, well, you can't change it retrospectively. You can only change it prospectively. Now, I doubt whether they know the difference between retrospectively and prospectively, but I don't want to be mean. Ha. The United States Supreme Court, I think it's in 1892, said you can change it at any time. It's your constitutional power solely. You don't share it with anybody. That clause doesn't say Congress, it doesn't say governor, it doesn't say newspapers, it says the state legislature. And the Supreme Court has said you can change that and take that power back anytime you want to, because it's your power. It's not theirs. Whatever power the governor or the Secretary of State thinks they're exercising, it isn't theirs, it's the legislature's. You can take it back. Already decided by the Supreme Court. And then based on evidence, not whim, not political bias, not fear of the media, based on evidence, you can make the determination. What is the right count? Well, how can we get as close to the right count as possible? If we can, then have the courage to select that person to get the electors, because that person won the honest vote. And every dishonest vote disenfranchises the decent people who cast an honest vote. Have the courage to do that. In history, I swear to God, you will be heroes. To half this. If you can't make a determination, then don't certify. That's happened before. If they have screwed this up so badly that you really can't make a determination, then the answer is you do not certify. You can't honestly put your name on a document that sends them the right result. As decent, honest people, that's what you should do. I know I will probably, this is probably the wrong tactic, but we're down near the end. I don't see how any decent, honest person could let this happen. I do not see how any decent, honest person could let this happen. So, with that, I just tell you that the characteristic of human beings that I admire the most, because my heroes are Churchill, Reagan, who's the only president I work for, my hero, and now our new president, who's been my friend for 30 years, and I always knew he'd be a good president, didn't know he'd be a great president. And that's the reason they want him out so badly, because he threatens them with destroying the corrupt system they have been enjoying in Washington since Bill Clinton got there. So, our first witness, Phil, are you ready? Oh, yes, why don't we, you want to explain this to them? Jenna will explain this to you.
And good morning. Thank you so much to the panel and the Arizona Legislature for having us today. This is incredibly important, and I can't underscore enough what the mayor has presented today about the opportunity that you all have to make sure that you use the constitutional provisions that our founders so keenly foresaw would be necessary for today. And this document that we want to present to you is called the Constitutional Authority of the State Legislatures to Choose Electors. We will present to you the facts, the evidence, and the witnesses so that you can make that determination. But we want you to have the research from someone else who is a constitutional law expert so that you can hear from someone else besides us that is also affirming the argument that we make today. And this document is very short, but it talks about the McPherson versus Blacker case, which for reporters, I would encourage you all to look it up and maybe write some articles about it. It's 146 US 1, and if you look at page 35, this was an 1892 case. And it says, nonetheless, the constitutional power to decide on the method for choosing electors remains exclusively with state legislatures. The Supreme Court has described the constitutional authority of the state legislatures to determine the manner of choosing electors as plenary. It has even noted that whatever provisions may be made by statute or by the state constitution to choose electors by the people, there is no doubt of the right of the legislature to resume that power at any time. And after you hear the facts and the evidence today, and we will give you this document to read, to be able to cite, and to draw firm grounding on your Article 2, Section 1.2 authority, we are going to ask you as legislators to reclaim that authority and to make sure that the people of Arizona and indeed the people of the United States of America as a whole are not disenfranchised by corruption. Federalist 68, Alexander Hamilton talks about the method of choosing our chief magistrate, our president of the United States, and that this safeguard of vesting that authority exclusively with the state legislatures is the safeguard to making sure that corruption does not win. And when the vote of the people and the voice of the people is corrupted through influence, through fraud, then it is the responsibility, the duty, and the obligation, not just the choice, but the actual duty and obligation of the legislature to step in and to make sure that you don't certify false results. You are the last step to make sure that this election is not corrupted. And again, we aren't asking you to step in and overturn an election. We are asking you to step in to make sure that the corruption that occurred here does not stand. And this is exactly why you are on the front lines. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll approach and give these to you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Ellis, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Giuliani, are you ready for Colonel Waldron?
Colonel Waldron is our first witness, and I'll ask him a few questions, and then he will make his own presentation, and then, of course, you're perfectly free to ask him any questions that you
Notice
want.
the credentials of the people.
Colonel
This is a
Waldron,
Correct.
and they were also used in Michigan.
Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania.
And the
several
machines
states.
that you observed, took a look at, were able to examine, were used in the Michigan vote.
Correct.
Now tell us a little about Dominion. Dominion is a company that makes voting machines and voting calculation machines.
That's correct. They've got full end-to-end election, equipment and software.
And the actual software in the Dominion machine, is that Dominion software or is it someone else's?
Dominion is more of a hybrid. Over the years, they've acquired other voting companies, Sequoia and Premier. Sequoia was spun off of SGO, and Premier was spun off of Diebold as a result of the antitrust lawsuit.
Sequoia is the company that was involved in the very serious miscalculation of the Chicago vote in 2007, wasn't it?
I believe that's correct, yes, sir.
And they were using Smartmatic software, right?
Correct. And the software, the licensing agreements are pretty well, it's a good spider chart for all of these companies. They all share a common DNA in the software code.
And that company, Smartmatic, their roots are in Venezuela, isn't that right?
Yes, sir. Hugo Chavez was one of the founders, and invested, I think, 28% ownership in the initial setup of the SGO election systems.
And they have been involved in several South American elections that were fixed, altered.
Argentina, Bolivia, Singapore, Venezuela, Italy, several.
And just to simplify things, and we can make this available to you, and we have several witnesses that go back to that period of time who were involved in the vote fixing, who have looked at the vote pattern in Arizona and elsewhere and said that the pattern matches the way in which Dominion and Smartmatic, companies like that, fix votes. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
And well, let me ask you this other question. One of the former officials of the United States government, a gentleman named Chris Krebs, the former DHS official, shortly after the election, he made an announcement that many of these people refusing to take a look at any evidence are relying on. What did he say?
Mr. Krebs was the director of CISA at DHS, and he basically said that this election was the most secure in history.
The most what?
Most secure in history.
The most secure in history.
And partially that was because the states do an excellent job of validating voter rolls, and that this equipment is not connected to the internet. That was in his.
He said this equipment, which was largely Dominion and several others, is not connected to the internet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is Dominion on his council?
Dominion was on Mr. Krebs' Election Security Advisory Council.
And is there, and we'll get to it, we'll witness it, is there substantial evidence, not only here in Arizona, but in other states like what we presented in Pennsylvania, that Dominion was in fact connected to the internet?
Are you referring to information other than the user's manual?
Well, let's go back to the user's manual. Tell them about the user's manual.
The Dominion Suite user's manual is about 1.5 inches thick. And my team went back to the user's manual and looked at all the instances where in the user's manual it tells operators to connect the Ethernet cords to the router, and it is the systems are connected to the internet.
And then what evidence do you have that there actually was connection to the internet?
Our teams looked at spider graphs of the Dominion network on election day, and showed the increased web traffic, internet traffic on election day for Dominion servers.
So on election day, Dominion was communicating by internet.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Contrary to what Mr. Krebs said or thought.
That
Not
is
supposed to be
correct.
hooked up to the internet.
And tell us now, how do they take us through how the vote can be modified, and then take us through what you saw in the machine in Michigan where they did actually modify the vote?
So my background in the military, started off my career as an air cavalry officer, flying helicopters, counter reconnaissance. Moved later into information warfare as an information operations officer, running psychological operations, computer network operations, deception, operation security, and electronic warfare, special electronic warfare. And our team has been researching this specific issue since August of this year. We are working with another team that's been intently working on this voting machine manipulation for about 2 years when it became apparent in the Ted Cruz and Beto race in 2018, as well as
I don't know what
Kentucky
RSBN has
governor
going on in the background.
we saw significant anomalies in those races, and that's kind of the experience or our background working with this system. And I would tell you, as an unconventional warfare information operations and affairs scenario, this is information warfare. The voting systems in the U.S. and Arizona, and several other machines were built to be manipulated. And as the mayor said, they've been used in elections around the world with questionable results.
What I think is, here comes
we believe
this
that these same questionable results are present
bus
in
just
this
arrived. Thanks
election.
for everybody that just tuned in.
Again, my
We were just talking before
get in
we went
and
on air
corrupt
officially.
these
Like,
machines
she
to
was
conduct
telling me that
strategic
this area where we're at,
influence
Savannah,
operations.
is a very and you know
Get
it's
the enemy
Democrat
or
and
target
Joe Biden
population
won
in a
it by
foreign
like
country
8 points
to,
and Hillary won it by 20. And it begs the question,
think and
did
act
they
a
really
certain
win
way.
it by that much? How
These
deeply
machines have
entrenched is the
multiple
corruption in the state of
points of
Georgia?
injection
And it
that
makes
All right, let's see if it's.
are vulnerable,
There you go.
everywhere
They're
from
having
the
some
server
issues with
level,
their Periscope
where
feed.
passwords, accesses are posted for the dark web for any hacker to get in and access them. And what they can do at the far, far right limit is download CSV files or like an Excel spreadsheet, change the columns and re-upload them. And that can be done at the server level. At the operator level, if there's software, it can be corrupted. It can be manipulated with a device that is as small and as simple as a USB device, which these machines are booted up and run off of. So the little bit of history, and I can show you some charts on the DNA of these machines, but the common software goes back to SGO Smartmatic. As the mayor mentioned, they sold Sequoia voting systems to Dominion in 2010, and then Diebold spun off the Premier election system to Dominion as a result of the antitrust
That
concerns. I
audio is
believe
the
that was
same. We
also
can
in
use this
2010.
picture 'cause it's a better
So the
one.
bottom line is that these systems all have similar code and similar functions, and it's displayed in their operator's manual. So,
No, it's not lined up.
I know it's kind of been, in the press, it's kind of been poo-pooed that, this doesn't go back to Hugo Chavez. But I personally debriefed the son of a Cuban intelligence officer who had firsthand knowledge, speaking with two of Hugo Chavez's family members, that in the Maduro election, when the populist uprising threatened Venezuela's totalitarian leadership, that Hugo Chavez's family members said that don't worry, that it's guaranteed that their father invested the money to build the SGO voting machine system. So in a nutshell, these systems are not what you've been told, if you've been told anything. They are connected to the internet. There is no transparency of how the voter information is processed, moved, and stored. And as a matter of fact, these companies have refused to allow any type of inspection into their code, and they always decry, it's our IP, it's IP protection. But with the declaration, I believe, with Jay Johnson, was our Secretary of Homeland Security. He declared that the national election system was national critical infrastructure. So there is, I think, reason for us to understand the code and how these machines function and how they use our votes and process our votes. The voting record is able to be modified, deleted, adjusted by administrators or outside threats, and those are also explained in the user's manual. Operators can assign votes for write-in votes, blank or error ballots in large numbers. So all of these votes, they could get put into a batch file, and then the administrator of that voting or tabulation system can say, okay, there's 8,000 votes in this batch file, or there's 5,000 votes in this batch file, and they can say, well, I think, you know, this batch will just make this go to this candidate, and they have that they have that authority in the user's manual to do that. Our team is not the only team that's working on this. There are literally hundreds of other small cyber teams that have weighed in on this. There are tons of statisticians. You'll hear from some of your Arizona citizens today, but we've been working in several states looking at these anomalies. But it's not a secret. I mean, DEF CON last year, I think the hacking teams broke in and manipulated these machines in under 2 minutes. So it can be done, it's easy, and there's very little security. So they can be hacked to manipulate votes. One of our white hat hackers discovered a malware on the server. It's called the Q-Snatch, that basically records login credentials and passwords. So if someone in Philadelphia, or someone in Maricopa County, or someone in Antrim, Michigan logged in, that malware will grab their username and password. And so you can log in. If you got access to the backside of that malware, you can log in wherever you are in the world to Maricopa County to manipulate. So there's multiple
Colonel,
ways.
Just interrupt you a second.
Yes, sir.
So we get the point of this clear. You actually examined one of the machines, and you were actually able to see very, very clear changes in vote in the machine, correct?
Correct, in Michigan.
And it was down ballot changes. How many?
Correct. So the down ballot looks, it was for, there were changes in the election day vote on 11/3 to the recount vote on 11/6. Say, for example, the school board, one lady on the election day received 519 votes, and this was a very small precinct. And the post recount, they went from 592 to 852. The total votes went from 1068 to 1810, and the write-in vote jumped from 24 to 112. There was another proposition on a state proposal that jumped significantly from 700 votes on election day up to 1083 on the recount. So there are a lot of variabilities, and what we believe this is due to is the USB drive that was used in the election day versus the post-election recount.
Well, this proposition, when I see, I think we should give them a copy of this, make this available to them, because it shows on the day of the election, this is a proposition about the use of future revenues generated from oil and gas bonuses. And I take it was fairly controversial. So the first vote was 774 for, 508 against. The second vote was 1083 for and 206 against.
Wow.
Quite a difference. Now, how did that difference come about? How do you accomplish that difference? How does the machine change from after the votes are cast? What does the machine remember other votes?
So there's a card that stores the votes, and it's run against the algorithm that's put on the USB card into the actual machine and the tabulator, and that difference was basically the tabulation algorithm.
Why, excuse me for my ignorance, but why would you put an algorithm in if you have a vote that's 774 to 508?
That's
Why wouldn't you just look and see, was that the correct vote? Why do you put an algorithm in which is introducing an outside force to what should be an internal process?
to shift things how you like them. When you look at moving these algorithms around through the different precincts, you can achieve quite a number of aggregate ballot shifts. So this was one instance and one recount and one small.
So when
precinct.
they looked at the machine on election day, it was 774 to 508. When they looked at it again on the recount 3 days later, it was 1,083 to 206. Is that right?
Correct.
And that happens because of an algorithm, not because anybody changed their vote.
The elections clerk did write an affidavit, and they basically said that we followed all the procedures on election day as well as a recount, and these were the results that the election clerk.
We're also
posted
going
on
to
the
submit
recount.
this study. It's quite complicated. I fell asleep last night reading it and had dreams about internet surveillance and all kinds of things. I propose getting an expert to look it over, but it shows exactly what the colonel is saying, that these machines should not be voting machines because anybody can communicate. It's like having an open computer. Anybody can communicate with them and do whatever they want with it. So we'll submit this and this to you that shows you that that they can be changed, that they were changed, and then exactly how you can do it. Now, we know we're not saying it about any of the machines in Maricopa County, but we haven't seen the machines in Maricopa County, nor have you. This evidence is being submitted to dispute the lies that Dominion and Smartmatic are putting out, which is their machines are perfect,
Right.
their machines can't be tampered with, their machines are tamper-proof. The reality is their machines are just the opposite. They're completely vulnerable. Is that right, Colonel?
And if you look up on the screen, that's exactly what, and let me see if I can, do I need to put this at full screen, or is it a better
I think you need to explain it.
So this is a Spiderfoot reconnaissance tool that looked at DominionVoting.com network that was analyzed on November 3rd. And basically this shows vulnerabilities. It shows volumetric internet traffic, the raw data. It shows all of the web servers, physical coordinates, all the vulnerabilities that are associated with the server. But basically, it does show that this was connected to the internet on voting day, and the volume of traffic was significant, and the vulnerabilities there are plenty of vulnerabilities that hackers could penetrate the system.
Can you tell if some of those communications went outside the United States?
We did observe packet traffic that were going from the U.S. Now, we don't know if it was specifically Dominion traffic going, but to a server in Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt, Germany.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
And who has it?
Could Colonel Waldron, could you just take a moment and explain packet traffic? Because there's probably a lot of folks who are not sure what that is.
So it's bits of information that are sent over the internet from in internet protocol from one point to another.
Thank you.
What's in Frankfurt, Germany that would be of interest?
Well, we looked prior to the election, one of our white hat hackers, and found that there was traffic in a Seidel server. Seidel is one of the companies, and I can show you we mentioned before the interconnectedness. Not that one. The interconnectedness of these companies. So this is sort of a historical link to all the voting companies, and we got Smartmatic in the middle. It's a licensor to Dominion Voting Systems. Seidel runs election night reporting through SOE software and Clarity Elections over here. And Clarity Elections is, if you click up on a lot of the county and Secretary of State voting systems, it'll pop up as property of Clarity Elections. So it doesn't really belong to the counties. It doesn't really belong to you. It really belongs to Clarity Elections.
So, I mean, just to make it simple, a Dominion machine that I go in and vote, it is susceptible to easily having that vote changed from the outside, or by them in particular.
By an authorized user or an unauthorized user.
By an authorized or unauthorized user?
Correct.
As
a
well?
hacker. A hacker.
A hacker. So my vote is only as good as the integrity of Dominion and all the hackers that exist that can get into the Dominion machine.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account.
Pardon me? Say that one more time.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account.
Can you think of any reason why anyone would hire them to count votes in the United States?
I could postulate a lot of.
Or any of them good reasons?
They have a strong lobby. They work with the government. They work with state government agencies, and they've got the infrastructure to sell their services.
What could go wrong?
Can you now look at, in reference to Arizona, the analysis you did of the vote in Maricopa and Pima counties that was reported? It's the Arizona fixing the vote chart.
So we noticed a difference in Arizona versus the other states. Our team mostly focused on what we call spike analysis, which were an electronic inject of a lot of votes, and where the number of votes that were injected in a specific time period exceeded the ability of the scanners to process ballots and upload. So basically, it's a signal of a potential anomaly where we would want to go in and do forensic analysis on the ballots that were processed in those batches to analyze. The way that these systems work is that you can run votes in, run votes in, run votes in, and if you get write-in ballots or error ballots, it just accumulates them into a batch file. And there may be, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 votes in this batch file, and then the administrator or the tabulator can just go, okay, I'm ready to process batch file, bloop, and they send it, and then it records those votes. In the user's manual, there's ways that it shows that the administrator can vote that batch, in a 80%, 20%, 100%, however the administrator chooses, and that basically is a tool to allow them to move votes through the system faster. So Arizona was a little bit different. It had a pretty strong rise right up at the front, the first part of voting day, whereas the other states, and I can show you those, have a gradual increase in votes. And this may have been due to the fact that Arizona allowed early counting and tabulation, so those batch files could have been dropped in right away. But this injection spike at 8:06:40 p.m., and this is adjusted from Zulu time, so this is 143,100 votes that were injected. That was in excess of what the machines could have processed. The real reason that we believe that this spike was a little bit of an anomaly, and should I show the email that was sent to the Arizona legislature?
You have the floor, sir.
Say again?
Yes.
So this was an anonymous email that was sent to all members of the Arizona legislature, and it was also sent to DOJ. This individual sent the email, wanted to remain anonymous, but had enough concern that he sent this to the criminal division of U.S. Department of Justice. He did not want to be included in the investigation, but the information that they recorded was what we would like the opportunity to investigate on your behalf, or a forensics team of your choosing. It doesn't matter to us, but it says that please be advised that Pima County Recorder, located at 240 North Stone Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, in Pima County, Arizona, and the Democratic Party added fraud votes in the initial count to the vote by mail totals released at 8 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. So this coincides with what we observed in the data analytics at that spike. We weren't aware of this email until after the fact. So there were approximately 35,000 fraud votes added to each Democratic candidate's vote totals. Candidates impacted include county, state, and federal election candidates. Through the utilization of the automated ballot count machines in Pima County elections, which were not Dominion, but they had the same pretty much functionality. My understanding is that 35,000 was embedded into each Democrat vote totals.
Wow.
Below are the meeting notes. In a meeting I was invited to by the Democrat Party in Pima County, Arizona on September 10th, 2020, no phones or recording devices were allowed. A presentation was given including detailed plans to embed 35,000 in a spread configured distribution to each Democrat candidate's vote totals. When I asked how in the world that will 35,000 votes be kept hidden from being discovered, it was stated that spread distribution will be embedded across the total registered voter range and will not exceed the registered vote count. And the 35,000 was determined allowable for Pima County based on our county registered vote count. It was also stated that total voter turnout versus total registered voters determine how many votes we can embed. This embedding will auto-adjust based on voter turnout. Because the embed votes are distributed sporadically, all embedded votes will not be found. If audited, because the embeds are in groups of approximately 1,000. This is so county recorder can declare an oversight issue or error as groups of 1,000 is a normal and acceptable error. So if you believe that your one vote counts for one vote, this is Maricopa County's embed totals will be substantially higher than Pima due to embeds being calculated based on the total number of registered voters. When I asked, has this ever been tested and how do we know it works? The response was yes. This has been tested and has shown significant success in Arizona judicial retention elections since 2014. Even undetectable in post-audits because no candidate will spend the kind of funds needed to audit and contact voters to verify votes in the full potential of total registered voters, which is more than 500,000 registered voters. This year, our Secretary of State has removed precinct level detail for election night releases so candidates can't see precinct overvotes. This is what I have for the meeting. Just thought I'd report this. Not sure if you can do anything since I was unable to have a recording device in the meeting. Again, we hope this individual would come forward and issue this as an affidavit, but this is significant, and we also noted that the reporting numbers from Pima and Maricopa County merged election day votes with write-in votes with absentee ballots, so there's no way to, in the publicly available data, to parse those votes into the segments. And I believe we noted in the piece of information that was provided to you that Maricopa County had 1.9 million mail-in ballot requests. So, and those, there was a Maricopa County official on videotape that did say that they did not validate the signatures on the write-in ballots this year. So that's a 1.9 million vote fraud potential, even if it's 0.1% of the vote. There's a lot of room for error.
Could we just review that quickly for 1 second so we get it right?
Ladies and gentlemen, please, I know that you're passionate about this, but there are a lot of people in this world that want to hear this, and if we can't hear the witnesses over remarks, that deprives people of hearing the truth.
So what I take from your testimony, Colonel, is that 35,000 votes were embedded for each Democratic candidate in Pima County.
Correct. That is the allegation of this email.
The allegation by the gentleman who hasn't given us an affidavit.
Correct.
That they were distributed based on the voter turnout carefully so they wouldn't look suspicious.
That's correct.
And that's essentially what the Dominion, Smartmatic, that's essentially their modus operandi, right?
That's their
They don't just put
CTP.
in 10,000 votes, they put it in carefully so it's hard to detect.
They move the algorithms around to different precincts until they get the the aggregate number that they want and need, and then they shift the algorithms to other precincts.
Did the Democratic candidates who got the benefit of those 35,000 false votes include Biden and Harris?
According to this email, it was all local and federal races.
So if that were true, then the result of the election is totally opposite the one that they're so anxious to certify. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Now,
and again, this
You would need
email
the
was sent to every Arizona legislature that I'm
now we don't know if the gentleman is telling the truth or not,
correct.
but would it be possible if you had the machines in Pima County to be able to see if there's evidence of this?
In order to do that, there would have to be a full forensic audit from the USB that drives the voting to the PCM CIA cards to the tabulators to the routers.
Well, I'm just asking, could it be done if you had
Yes.
the will to
Yes,
do
sir.
it?
Yes, sir.
If you wanted to find out if the vote in Pima County were honest or not, wouldn't you do it?
Yes, sir.
And without doing it, you really have no idea.
That's correct.
And the machines used in Pima County are different, but are they that much more secure?
These systems, they all have similar vulnerabilities. Our team focused on Dominion. Our partner team focused on ES&S, and they're very similar as far as vulnerabilities.
Now, did he say anything that suggests the same thing happened in Maricopa County?
This gentleman appeared to be an IT specialist in Pima County. So he only wrote allegedly to what he observed.
And do we have any knowledge that anyone from the state of Arizona attempted to look for him?
I believe the legislators, some of the legislators did try to locate this gentleman.
Anybody from law enforcement?
Not that I'm aware of. But again, I'm not law enforcement, so I'm not sure.
But even if you can't find him, you could determine the validity of this, or maybe determine the validity of this by doing a forensic audit.
Correct.
There's an available scientific tool that would tell you, I mean, did Biden get 35,000 phony votes?
That's correct.
And it's not being utilized, as far as you know, by the state of Arizona.
Pima County, I believe the total vote total was less than a million in Pima County. So it would be possible and feasible to do a full audit, a ballot audit. And I also was informed that your state, through the Counterterrorism Information Center and the DPS here in Arizona, do have the capability to analyze and validate ballots for ink consistency. So if there were mass-produced ballots in Maricopa County that were stuffed, your DPS, I've been informed, has the capability to analyze those ballots for paper consistency and ink consistency. So if there were mass-produced ballots, you could determine that on your own.
Excuse me, Colonel Waldron. So I think what you're saying, and I'm going to repeat this back to you, these might be pre-printed ballots to simply move through the system. Is that what you're suggesting?
There are indications, we have affidavits from Pennsylvania that there were ballots that were pre-positioned in a bobtail trailer, a tractor trailer truck.
Okay.
And that these ballots were, the thought was that this was a cache that they could go and grab the amount of ballots they needed and take them to the specific tabulation centers. And that's an affidavit that's from our Pennsylvania work. This
Colonel,
TTP is standard.
so repeat one more time the piece of information that I think people were shocked about, because it is hard to believe. Did you say that a Pima County official said that they didn't validate any of the mail-in votes?
That was Maricopa.
Maricopa,
They didn't
sorry.
validate the signature. They didn't validate the signatures on the mail-in ballots.
And that's 1.9 million.
Correct.
Free for all.
And do we know who that is?
I would have to get the video.
Well, could you get it for us?
Oh, yes, sir.
No, you don't have to do it right now, but before the end of the hearing? That would render every one of the 1.9 million votes absolutely never checked for fraud, deceit, mistake. And if they're mail-in votes, that can't be done now. They've been separated from the envelope.
Correct.
That would indicate,
The
so those
validity
are
of the
basically
individual.
1.9 million votes that are illegal votes.
Or that had the potential to be illegal votes that weren't validated. The signatures weren't
But
validated.
can we determine now if any of them are legal or illegal?
If the envelopes were separated from the ballots, there would be no way to tell a ballot for candidate. You could still go back and look at the envelopes to validate the signatures, but you wouldn't know what the ballot.
And
that
isn't
was
that
in
the reason
envelope.
you're supposed to have an observer when you do that?
That is part of the chain of custody procedures, I believe, in Arizona.
And when they talk about chain of custody, that's what they're talking about, right?
Correct.
Because a lot of witnesses are going to talk about that. So let's just sum up a few of the things that you also found. Tell us about the green button in Maricopa County on the machine. And there is one witness that's going to testify that all day she saw election officials constantly pressing the green button when somebody was voting.
So what that was when a voter wasn't sure, and I believe this was also linked to another witness that's going to talk about with the differences in the pins and the Sharpies, that the Maricopa Elections Division, in early voting, they specified that only use ballpoint pins for voting, and then on election day, they specified only use Sharpies. And the idea is that as the bleed through on the ballot, as the scanners would cause an error in an error ballot. By creating the error ballot, the election officials basically would slide those votes into a batch file that could be adjudicated by the election administrator or the operator.
They could change it.
And the green button was to say, okay, there's an error, but go ahead and push cast ballot, and it punches that into an error file that can be adjudicated by the election administrator.
Now, and you examined the voter database, and your team did, right?
Say again, sir?
You examined the voter database, you and your team.
Those were actually some local Arizona folks that examined that.
So you took that from
I spoke directly.
state data?
with them.
Oh, I see, okay. You spoke directly to whom?
To local investigators here.
And you have here voter database discrepancies. 6,000 voters, at least, entered into database with no sex and default date of birth, and they're non-existent in LexisNexis.
Correct, and I believe there'll be a witness to discuss that later this morning.
So unless those can be discovered, those votes would have to be eliminated.
Correct, and it was explained to me that the way that happens is that you can register online for a driver's license at the same time you can register for voter registration. But the driver's license doesn't require the same information as the voter rolls, and so those kind of go into a queue that the Secretary of State would approve for the voter rolls over time. But there appear to be 6,000 voters that were on the voter rolls in the voter database with no sex and a default date of birth. So in other words, they entered 0101, 1900 or whatever that date was.
They also discovered over 2,000 votes that used a false address, an address of a vacant lot.
Correct.
You already told us about the 1,915, 487 mail-in votes that were not verified with regard to signature in Maricopa County.
Maricopa, correct.
Also, in Pima and Maricopa County, Republican poll watchers were very often forced to stay outside, and unable to view the vote processing.
Correct.
And is there an estimate of the number of illegal immigrants that voted in the election? Has anyone done an estimate of that?
The American Immigration Council suggests that there are about 300,000 ineligible voters, and then the one of the local newspaper reported that there were another 312,000, I believe, non-incarcerated felons and other ineligible voters.
Has any attempt been made to investigate that, to determine if they can locate a sufficient number of illegal immigrants voting illegally that would have a bearing on the outcome of the election?
That would really be done by the the county election officials.
But it hasn't been done.
Not that
And they're
I'm
going to
aware of.
certify the vote, apparently, without doing it.
I'm not aware if they.
It would
did or not.
be, you'd have to be an idiot not to think that illegal aliens, immigrants voted, right?
It's very possible.
How many are there in Arizona, approximately? Anybody's guess, but what's the lowest number?
That
Can
would be
anybody help me
a
with that?
question for the local legislatures.
5 million, 4 million?
I wish we knew, sir. I wish we knew.
Mr. Chairman.
What's the lowest number we could use? 4 million?
Representative Cook?
Mr. Chairman, my colleague, Representative Townsend, and I have had several discussions over the past few weeks about that number, and she could provide that to Mr. Giuliani.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Ms. Townsend.
Mr. Chair, is this on? Thank you. And Mr. Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, I can't tell you how many people are in this state that are potentially can vote illegally as an illegal alien, but I can tell you that there is a way for them to vote under the federal only voter program, meaning that someone here illegally or a fake name, anybody that can put together a voter registration card with a fake name, or if they're not eligible to vote and are not in the MVD system here in Arizona, when they register to vote, if they're not found in the MVD system, the DMV system, they're not there, then they're contacted to see, do you have a birth certificate? Do you have anything to prove your citizenship? When they don't answer, then their name is relegated to the federal only voter list, which there's 36,000 in the state of Arizona of people who can't prove their citizenship, can't prove they exist, other than when they show up to election day, all they have to do is show their bank statement, their title to their car, anything you can reproduce on your own computer with your fake name on there or whatever, and onto a bank statement, and you get a ballot, and you can vote for president and your congressperson and senator. So up to 36,000 plus people in Arizona could potentially vote, and I do have the numbers of who has voted in Maricopa County is 4,100 of the true federal only, and another 4,000 that are supposedly out of state. So those alone haven't been researched deeply enough to know, does that name even exist as a person? And are they here, is that someone here who's here illegally or not? So we don't know upwards of 8,000 people in Maricopa County alone who have cast a ballot who weren't able to.
Well, I mean, that's pretty astonishing. So I will say, and I may be wrong, but let's say there were 5 million illegal aliens in Arizona. It is, it's beyond credulity that a few 100,000 didn't vote, particularly given Representative Townsend's explanation that there's an encouragement that goes on to have them vote. Now, every one of those votes would be an illegal vote. Every one of those votes denies a lawful voter of their franchise. It just wipes it out. Has there been any attempt to try and investigate that after the election, even on a sample basis, like going to a district where there are a large number of possible illegal aliens, and go back and check the names and see, were there 5,000, were there 10,000, were there
Mr. Chair.
20,000? Has there been even an attempt to do that?
Mr. Chair.
None that I'm aware of.
Well, I mean,
Members?
that's totally,
Can I speak to that, Mayor?
yes, please.
Yes, please.
So we put in, 2 years ago, we put in an elections integrity unit in the Attorney General's office, and I've been on the phone with them, asking them what are they going to be doing, how can they look into this, and they told us that they don't have the authority to go out and look for a crime. They have to have it presented to them, so they can't go out and do an audit, they can't go out and and actively research this. I also was told the same thing by the Board of Supervisors, that they cannot perform an audit above and beyond what's already been done that's in statute. So all we're really left with that I'm aware of is having, and as much as I appreciate this forum today, and I'm very grateful for you, we need an actual committee hearing. Like, I'm the chair of the Elections Committee. If we were to hold an actual committee hearing, we would have subpoena power to go and look at the machines, to look at these things, and inspect them, and get down to it. So we can do an audit. We just need to conduct a committee hearing to give us that subpoena power to be able to do so.
Mr. Julian?
So when this vote is certified, if that's not done, there is no question in any reasonable person's mind that the vote totals contain large numbers of illegal votes from people who are not citizens of the United States. The question is, how many? And the officials certifying have made no effort to find out the truth, which seems to me gives the state legislature a perfect reason to take over the conduct of this election, because it's being conducted irresponsibly and unfairly. Why doesn't your state legislature exercise its responsibility under the Constitution? First step. What's wrong with it?
Mr. Giuliani, that is the essential question that we are here to ask.
Good. So now, anything else? Colonel, you did a great job. He's available for any more questions.
If you are done,
all day.
if you are done, Mr. Giuliani, we do have a number of questions from the panel members for you, sir.
Good. Yes, sir.
All right. The first thing I'd like to ask is, you spoke on system capability. And I know that much has been made of the excoriation of the state of Texas on the Dominion equipment, software, and all that. Can you provide just a very short comment on why they said, not only are we not recommending this, we're prohibiting the use of this equipment in our state?
In a nutshell, vulnerabilities that were issued, not addressed, and not fixed. There were too many system vulnerabilities.
Okay. And you also referenced a comment about DHS. And I'm struggling with, why did DHS say security for this election was the best it had ever been? Do you have any insight into that?
In my experience in life, there's generally two factors for individual. I mean, it's either competence or commitment. So they were either incompetent or not committed to learning the truth at the senior leader level, not
Okay.
at the operator level.
And does DHS know about the information that you've shared with us or that you're sharing with us in the process of this? Have you shared that with them specifically?
And much more.
So beyond what you're saying here, you've gone into much greater depth.
Yeah, we have relationships with our local DHS personnel in Texas, in both the intelligence divisions and CISA. When I started working on this project in August, I called them up, said, "You guys have got to come out and look at it." They did. They spent an initial 3 hours going through this data. At the end of that, one of them said, "I think I need to go outside and throw up."
Wow.
Okay, besides that, did they do anything about it?
They had multiple follow-ups. They drove up to our Dallas counterpart team, received over 600 gigabytes of data that had been accumulated over time. Our team provided them over 200 gigabytes of confirmatory data, and they analyzed that. After they analyzed, there was a passive scan done. They conducted a limited scan and determined that there were vulnerabilities. They held numerous meetings with their folks, the CISA cyber side, and the INA, which is the Intelligence Assessment Division.
And I'm sorry, CISA, could you let the folks who are watching know what CISA is?
CISA is the agency in DHS that's responsible for cyber and infrastructure.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Representative Biasucci.
Thank you,
One note that might be important. Members of the elections division of CISA, I was told would never attend the meetings or the briefings that were conducted internal to DHS on the material that we had presented.
And I'm sorry, who is that did not participate?
The election security division inside of DHS.
Okay, thank you. Representative Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Colonel. I just wanted to make sure I have this correct. So when we're talking about, it was Mr. Krebs? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. He stated the most secure election in history. He stated we're not connected to the internet. He stated no votes leave this country. This is all things he's stated publicly. So are you,
on the CISA website, correct?
right. So are you willing to say under oath that you have seen the connection to the internet? You have seen it go offshore to Germany, Frankfurt. Are these things that you have personally seen and can say that is not true?
Our white hat hackers, yes, they have that traffic in the packets.
So why would he make that kind of comment, do you think?
Either not knowing, believing the myth, or not wanting the truth to be known.
Thank you.
Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Colonel. I've got a couple questions on the Board of Supervisors. During one of their hearings, had said that the text for this equipment, that's, by the way, the county doesn't own this equipment. It's leased by Dominion and Smartmatic. But is it irregular? Is it SOP for the tech reps to be there during the election process?
Yeah, that's been something we observed in Michigan and Pennsylvania, whether they're full-time Dominion employees or contractors. There are Dominion employees that are there to run the equipment.
Because at the Board of Supervisors hearing they'd actually made comments that they actually provided them an office space in the county for them to handle this stuff. My question is, a couple weeks ago they did a test just to show that how the system was secure. So they did it before and mid and then after tests, so everybody could see that the Board of Supervisors and the county elections that see this cannot. So what you're hearing is false. Obviously, or is it during that test? Can they find the anomalies in there during that basically what I always call a dog and pony show? Would that show up in one of these tests?
In a forensics examination?
No, just see, come here and look at this is how we certify the machines, calibrate the machine, whatever, zero it out, this and that. Obviously, these anomalies would not be showing up during that moment, correct?
Correct, and it's our understanding that Dominion had a software update, at least in a couple states. I'm not sure about Maricopa County, but like the day before the election.
Representative Bartow, any questions?
I did have one question. Thank you, and Colonel. Excellent information. You described web traffic increase during the election as opposed to, how do you measure the increase?
Are you talking just on the Dominion server network?
Yes.
They just look at volume of data that's moving through the pipes. And I'm not our hacker team they're the experts. I just kind of the big picture know how to dance it, but they do measure volume traffic. Matter of fact, on the Frankfurt server on election day, there was a German cybersecurity professor that was noting that the increase in traffic was, and he related it back to COVID and said, we haven't even hit our indoors winter season yet, and we've hit the highest traffic. And he specifically noted that one of the reasons was the American elections.
Was it an exponential increase?
I don't think it's been exponential, but I think it went from 7 point something terabytes a second to 10 terabytes. So it went to a lot of, a pretty big increase, not an exponential though.
Okay, to my unqualified mind, I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds big.
The volume jumped up pretty significantly on November 3rd and 4th to that particular server in the pipes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
To that
So,
particular server in
Colonel
the
Waldron,
pipes.
so essentially
Not like
about
web traffic, everybody
33,
watching the
34,
election.
35% increase?
I would have to go back and look at the numbers, but.
I mean, from 7 to 10?
Ballpark.
Yeah, that's big.
I can't remember.
Yeah, all right, very good. Senator Gowan, you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, you talking about the SGO system, and that was, you said Hugo Chavez, he was partial owner in that. Now, that's the beginning of Dominion?
SGO was a separate company, but Dominion acquired Sequoia Systems that was spun off of SGO. And they also acquired Premier, which was spun off of Diebold, but they all have the common core, or the common code really goes back to SGO. And that one org chart that I put up there kind of showed the licensing agreements that go back and forth between SGO and Dominion. So it's the licensing for the software and the code.
Why would
So
you need a
it
license
still
if it
stems
wasn't
from the
same software?
SGO system.
That's correct.
So, and then you're stating Dominion owns the data. So does that mean when they see the vote count that they own that, not the counties, the state?
They process it, they retain it. It's in their backup servers.
So they have the votes themselves as well when that's supposed to be property of the state.
They've got the data. They've got the voter data, voter registrations.
And then you said Dominion sits on the board of Mr. Krabs, is that right?
That was on the CISA website.
When you say the board, what is the board?
It was their Election Security Advisory Council.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's see. Representative Roberts, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel Walton, earlier you were talking about the methods via internet and internal methods as far as, I think you used the term, I forgot exactly how you said it. There was basically methods from the internet and then also internally that there could be manipulation of votes. So my question is do you have any knowledge of were the machines in Arizona connected to the internet at any point in time? And if not, or if so, are there logs internally in these machines that if we were to be able to subpoena these machines and demand them so they could be examined, could we see all of those changes that were made?
So when you watch CBS, CNN, any of the mainstream media where they've got the live vote updates, that data is passed live. I mean, it's as the votes are updated. So it's, nobody's getting in a plane and flying the hard drive to New York. I mean, it's uploaded and it's connected. So it is connected to the internet, and whether it's locally, I mean, they can move votes with the cards, the voter cards. Those can be preloaded in laptops with the software that could be interdicted and upload fake votes, as in the allegation from Pima County, in batches of 1,000. They can scan blank ballots, and then the administrator can allocate that batch of blank ballots to one candidate or another, either in 100% or any percentages that they allocate in the, according to the user's manual.
So to that point, just indulge me just a moment. Would you say that is what we saw in the 2018 election with Governor Bevin, where we actually saw on television, real time, the movement of some 500 votes from one candidate to another. I mean, it was so stark, you saw them go down on one and up on the other on the exact number. Would that be a manifestation of what you're talking about?
So the working hypothesis from our counterparts on that, because they worked that and watched it, and they actually went to Kentucky to assist the team there, was that was a server level interdiction. So they went up to the server, downloaded a CSV file, changed the votes, and re-uploaded it.
All right, thank you. Representative
Kentucky's
Roberts.
governor's not
So,
Kentucky's governor.
just to kind of tack on to what we were just discussing, it's my understanding, because there was an article here in Arizona from the Arizona Daily Independent, there was a quote-unquote whistleblower that was talking about issues that they had observed. And so one of the things they were talking about was that the data from the machines was being moved via the hard drive. So what you just described as far as the real-time data being uploaded and all that stuff, just for the layman, that same type of manipulation, whether you plug in an Ethernet cable or what have you, or you're doing it on a user interface, that same type of malfeasance could be accomplished in that method as well.
Yeah, and I think in looking at these systems, we identified, almost a dozen ways that you could inject or interdict to manipulate.
This kind of hearing should have happened before
On that
they
note,
even
you
chose
said earlier
electronic
that
systems.
pretty much all of these machines have vulnerabilities. So is there any system out there that you're aware of that is worth exploring, or do we just need to go back to the paper ballot?
There is MIT developed a system with some capital infusion. It's a system called Votes, VOATZ, and it's a blockchain type system. Again, it's when I first became aware of this, I went and talked to some friends of mine who were bank presidents, and I said, okay, why can't we apply banking principles? Because if you want anything done right, you go talk to the money people. That's who protects their stuff. And he said, oh yeah, and it's an app. You can do it as an app with tie it in with Real ID and a blockchain type solution, or the next generation solution.
We don't want that.
But there are systems, and I believe the
No
votes
blockchain
system
voting.
is deployed right now. I believe there, and I know West Virginia is one that I remember reading on their website.
Thank you.
Sir, Senator Allen, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Please
Chair.
proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate it. Thank you here today. I'd like to go back to the Board of Supervisors letter where they talk about certifying the Maricopa County election. And they have 5 points that they make for the reason why they call this a reliable election. And my concern is, of course, over the Dominion tabulation equipment. They said it was vetted by a bipartisan equipment certification advisory committee before the contract was finalized. And as required by law, the committee tested the functionality and accuracy of tabulation equipment before it was used in any Arizona election. Well, after listening to your testimony, that does not give me any confidence, because the machines, of course, can perform very accurately. It's after the fact, after the election starts, after the ballot is starting to be put into the machine, that these problems start arising. So is that accurate to say that this should not give us confidence about this being a reliable election?
Ma'am, anything that is software based can be manipulated and changed with a click of a button, or you got 2 USB drives, plug one in and you get one algorithm, you pull it out, you plug another one in, you get a different algorithm. And we also believe on the connectedness, these can be pushed down from the top and shifted down. So think of it like a casino or a state lotto. Whoever owns the eye in the sky, you can control the margins. And that's really, I think, what we're looking at.
Well, certainly from your testimony, I can see that. And I have one more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
I believe Senator Borelli has it to that point.
All right, go ahead.
I yield.
All right, please proceed.
Well, I was going to switch down to the 1% early ballots that they did, and I had a question about that. So, Sonny, if you have something to what I said before, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, so basically what you're saying, for example, since the techs are already there on site during the process, so if a machine jams up and naturally they call the tech over there to go fix the unjam, they could literally, without anybody noticing, because they're the techie people, they could stick a thumb drive in there and upload, change the numbers, manipulate, whatever.
There was an affidavit in Pennsylvania from, I think it was last week. A gentleman supervisor had a Ziploc bags full of USB drives, and they noted that he was inserting the USB drives into the machines at a much higher rate than would be necessary or that they had seen in the past. So, yes, you know, it's very,
Okay.
very.
So now I have it to that point. Forgive me, but what I think you're saying is that they have just created an electronic footprint, either in the data download that you're seeing real time, that you'd be seeing some kind of a spike, or is there something that's captured on the machine that itself, like a memory card that is resident on the machine, not that is actually talking to the hard drive?
The machines, for the most part, the voting machines are just run by, removable software and data cards, the cards that actually hold the votes. The backup servers is really where the true story would reside, as far as the uploads, downloads, the change, the error warnings for the mismatch errors.
So would you be able to show with specificity a machine in Maricopa County going all the way across the pond, inserting data into a server? Or would it be an aggregate of all the machines that were in Maricopa County, for example? Is it by individual tabulator, or is it by the server here that collects? Can you help me understand that piece?
Let me, I'll put up
That probably goes back to your headache graph, I'm thinking.
Yeah, a schematic that source shows that.
The reason I asked the question is we're still looking for evidence, and if that is in the evidence package, that's certainly something that we would want. Body would be great.
He's in his zone. I know. He's like, I know I got it. I know I got it.
Let me see if I can make this bigger.
Oh, he's got it. Is that RSBN in there? Yeah.
So this is Dominion voting, the high level. It's a block diagram of how everything's connected, and I can print this off and provide it to you, or whoever would do your audits. But it's kind of hard to see when it's blown up. But you've got ballot boxes, ballots taken out, and this tracks all the way through the image cast central to ballot images, and this is really what's voted. The ballots are scanned into these image casters, and there's an electronic image created. It goes into results files, and then it goes into validation, adjudication, auditing, reporting, and publishing, and then to Democracy Suite EMS, the Democracy Suite servers, the database servers, the document management servers, and it kind of shows you how this all goes out to the world from this whole system. Election data, this is kind of the top feed to all these servers, but this is really, it's a network. I mean, it's a computer company. It's all networked. It has to be.
So let me reframe the question. We probably would not be able to identify any specific tabulation machine showing up on the server because it's all aggregated.
Yeah, it's these tabulation machines go through this process, but the results files. So if you work it backwards from the server, you would be able to go back to a ballot image.
Okay.
An electronic ballot image.
All right, thank you. Senator Allen, you have
Yes.
another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing in this letter by the Board of Supervisors was they commented, again, of what made this a reliable election, that the election day ballots from 2% of vote centers and 1% of early ballots is required by Arizona law, and it yielded a 100% match to the results produced by the tabulation equipment. So that should give us, you know, and all the counties do this. They do this hand count, this little audit of a small percent of the votes to see how it matches up to the machine. Could you explain how we shouldn't have confidence in that particular, how can they make that match up to the machine then when they just arbitrarily pick out 1%? If there's vote dumps that are happening and things that are happening throughout the process.
I would just say it's something we learned a long time ago, garbage in, garbage out. If you've got 1.9 million votes that the signatures aren't verified, and they're just reading bubbled in, you know, ballot cards, then yes, the ballot cards, when they run 1,000 ballot cards through, are going to come out with 1,000. So that, you know, that small batch would represent what those particular ballots say. But that's why there's chain of custody requirements. That's why there's verification requirements at each step along the way. So if one of those steps is broken, then the validity of the whole process is in question. You know, you just don't know.
Right. Thank you. I think we're definitely, sir, in a new day when it comes to what is taking place across this country with voting, and we're going to have to probably really look at that. Thank you.
Representative Townsend, you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Colonel, I just have a quick follow-up to some of the stuff we've been talking about as far as the security of the machines themselves. And as we know, like whether or not something happened or didn't happen, I'm most concerned with voter confidence. And if there's all these holes, then we're going to really deflate or collapse voter confidence. So I would like you to reassure me on one particular item. In the tabulation room at the MCTEC here in Phoenix, in years past, you had to have a special badge, and only people that were certified to be in that room with the machines and the tabulation and all that were allowed in there. This year, I was told yesterday we had teams of 25 adjudicators in that room, in the tabulation room with those machines. Would it have been possible for someone in that scenario to wander over to the machine and have a conversation and put in this thumb drive you're talking about, or is it deeper than that, or something that's happened from remotely, or how secure are these machines? Because we know that there's no chain of custody on the hard drives, and on, you know, the machines we saw in a video left alone for almost a week in one of the voting centers, unattended, unsecure. You know, how could somebody, a regular person with nefarious intentions, walk up and change this whole election by putting in a thumb drive and changing an algorithm? Is that something that could have happened, or we don't have to worry about that?
Either an individual that has knowledge of the systems and how to, you know, operate in the system could have an impact, again, from the server. They could be sitting in Nigeria in a, you know, as long as they've got an internet connection, they could get to that particular server. If they had access to, you know, the data from the malware that's on the server, they could get the login and password from, you know, a Pima County operator or, you know, a Maricopa County operator. So there are just so many places that they can be interdicted or penetrated. There's just too many to, you know, to describe. But there's a lot of ways it could be interdicted.
Mr. Chair and Colonel, so what I'm hearing you say is I can't be confident that a volunteer of a political party that, you know, the entire recorder's office and the elections director, everyone could have been on the up and up, and this is the most secure election ever. But if one random volunteer with the right information were to be in the tabulation room, could have then breached the security of the machine.
Correct.
And therefore, we cannot stand here and say we are confident with that kind of access to these machines left in buildings for a week. We cannot say with certainty that this is a secure election and we have 100% confidence that nothing went wrong.
And you just brought up the chain of custody issue, and that's a critical vulnerability path. So that if the chain of custody was broken, then you really don't know. You can't say with confidence that it was a fair.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair and Colonel, last point, if you were in charge, would you want a recount? Would you want an audit? Would you want a do-over? What would you do?
A forensic audit will tell you what was processed, but to the mayor's point earlier, as soon as those mail-in ballots, which were 1.9 million requested, and I think a good
Roughly.
percentage return, if those signatures weren't verified, then
There's nothing you can
you
do.
can count the same things over and over again, but you're starting with flawed results already. An audit, a full audit, would be able to tell you if those were, bad ballots or pre-printed ballots. You could do a full forensic audit on the actual ballots, but once the envelopes are separated from the ballots on that many mail-in ballots, it's almost
A wash.
it's almost impossible to go
Which
back
is
without
why
doing a
they did it.
forensic analysis of each ballot and the paper in the end.
Nobody's
Okay,
ever
and
gonna
Mr.
come back
Chair
to
and
this,
Colonel,
like-
do you have any information about potential shipments of ballots to Arizona and other places from North Korea or something like, do you have any information like that?
There were several affidavits that were provided to the legal teams. I don't have those affidavits with me now, but there were affidavits and suggestions, and I think more of those are in process to obtain more affidavits on those processes.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us whether or not you have got, I don't know if you heard the question, or do you have affidavits that counterfeit ballots were somehow shipped into Arizona?
I have to look.
All right, thank you. Representative Cook, any questions?
Did he say yes?
Yes,
I have to look.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I'll make it brief, but I do have some stuff that I'd like to say is that,
Can we get to the witnesses?
Colonel, when I ran for office in 2016, I got a phone call one day that one of our county recorder's office information had been breached and all of the voter information was for sale on the dark web. That was my first instance of becoming representative about this hacking and computer stuff and what's out there. I just went through my third election as the top vote getter, and I would like to say that I continuously have been tried to be hacked on my personal or ledge account or whatever is out there on the internet. I later learned from people, Colonel, that the reason why this is done out of the country, and according to your graph, is that it is harder for us to track these people down and prosecute them when these computer anomalies and things happen from outside the country,
Right.
inside our country and state. Would that be true?
We would not have the legal jurisdiction to go seize or search a server outside of the U.S.
Thank you, Colonel. And would this make sense that if you had a simple phone number and then you went on the internet and then researched that phone number of where you received a text message and it was from Ukraine, would that not be a red flag that your phone or information was trying to be attacked or infiltrated?
Correct, it would be.
Okay, so moving on to that, Colonel, what I've noticed is that about these voting machines and these plugged-in USB drives, when in fact, when we watch across this great country of ours, in many states, we have very few amount of counties compared to other states in here. You got to target 2 counties. If you notice that rural Arizona and rural Arizona legislators are up here, we're ready to go to work today. Our constituents demand it, and we demand it as their representatives to work for them to solve these problems.
He said that
But what
our
happens,
constituents
Colonel,
were
is
doing
that the
it
same
today
thing when we
and
look at this
acting
country on a map and
counts.
counties that vote for the President Trump versus counties that don't. It's the population and the masses. So I'm going to get to my point about Maricopa and Pima County. Okay, we all, in rural Arizona, we call it the great state of Maricopa, because Maricopa County has more legislators at the legislature than rural Arizona does. If we add all of ours up, we still don't have the numbers to be an equal voice at the state legislature, but we have to work harder, which we can. So if we look at Maricopa and Pima County, if I was going to, now we're going to get down to vote centers, okay, targeted vote centers, Colonel. I wouldn't have to have a USB drive or to infiltrate every voting machine in every vote center in Maricopa and Pima County, would I? Or would I just need to target those individual voting centers in those two massive counties in the state to do what you are saying, to take votes and shift them over in those numbers? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I've seen analyses that boiled down national elections to zip codes, to just zip codes.
Mr. Chairman, I get fired up when I get into this stuff because I read and hear everything that these people have said. It has happened to me. And I just thank you again for your information, confirmation. But when I go back to the 2016 hacking, what I see as a pattern, Colonel, is that there is a plan. There's a larger plan, and it's not a conspiracy theory, and I'm not nuts. But if I wanted to engage in a plan in 2016, Colonel, would I not start hacking and getting the VOTA databases and information of projecting of why do we have, what is the number, 2,000 or 1,200 voters, I believe, in Maricopa County registered that I believe have voted at a vacant lot? I mean, if I really wanted to go down the road, isn't that the way you would target it?
Yeah, and again, it's you can interdict this in multiple levels and multiple methods, and I think that's what's happened. There's so much out there, and it's to your point, you know, you're not a conspiracy theorist, but it's really hard. They've made it so hard for the public to understand it, and we call that in deception operations ambiguity increasing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colonel, I have the last question is, and what concerns me over what I've read and seen is that could the data that you say could be traced back only to the scanned ballot at this point, so it can't go back to the individual voting machines, could that be bleach bits or whatever that stuff is? Could that be, could the tracks, the longer we take to actually get the machines and check these things out, could there be time to erase that information and cover up if there was a crime or misdealings?
There could, but now the batch files will go back to the precinct and the machines on the tapes. So you can track it all the way back to the machines and the precincts by the tapes, and it's what we showed in the Antrim County, those printouts on the precinct level. So that you can go back. But really all that's necessary to do, there's not really a bleach bit. It's just pulling the USB drive out of the voter machine and the tabulators. So the machines themselves, other than the servers, really don't have a lot of resident information. The tabulation machines, you know, they can have some stored images, but the you know, where you retain these you know, the federal election requirements require, and I can't remember the U.S. Code Title 46 rings a bell, but the 22-month retention of federal elections records, it would be done in those the ballot images and, you know, electronic backups. So the data is retained, and there, you know, you can do forensics on it as long as it's the actual servers and the actual machines.
Colonel, thank you for your time, your patriotism, and Mr. Chairman, I yield any remaining time I may have.
Thank you. I believe Senator Gowan has one more question, and I just need to remind the panel, time grows short. I think Mayor Giuliani has significant more witnesses and evidence that he'd like to have heard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Colonel, I just want to get on, come back to the Dominion situation here. Where are the backup servers?
I'm sorry?
Where are the backup servers?
I am not exactly sure. I can try to get that information provided to you.
And this company, I think the mayor said they were a foreigner company. The Canadian, is that what it is?
So we know there are sites in Toronto. Their offices are in Canada, so we know that there were data there. They also have servers in Serbia and other countries.
Wow.
But as far as knowing for sure where the data from Maricopa County went and resides, we don't know that. But they've got backup servers.
We don't
So
know that.
an audit, because we talked about that a little
We
earlier.
don't even know where it's at. No big deal. Serbia.
First off, would
Canada.
that
Where the heck these people at?
find where the server is
They
and
shut down
where
their Toronto
the
office,
information
by the
would
way.
be?
Tracing the flow of the information,
This-
yes, sir.
The audit would do
They shut
that.
down their U.S. office.
But it also
Where are
tell
these
us whether or not
They went
it's
Colorado
true or
or
not
something like
that the 1.9 million signatures were or were not verified, right? So we would have an absolute knowledge of that.
Question of-
Colonel, could you get a
poll
little bit
watchers
closer to the
being able to
microphone?
make
I'm
sure.
getting a lot of people who are saying, I can't hear the guy talk.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
the adjudication of the signatures on the ballots, that would be totally separate. It wouldn't be necessarily a digital forensic process, but that audit would be, have to be conducted at the county level on all the envelopes.
So if we did an audit, if we were able to do that, tell me the things that could come out of that.
Well, if the signatures on the envelopes were invalid, you could necessarily get a percentage of the votes that would be disqualified. But again, when the ballots are separated from the envelopes, you can't tell which ballot came from which envelope. So really, all that would tell you is a percentage of that, the percentage of those mail-in or absentee ballots that were not legitimate.
So what could the server tell us?
The server will basically tell you all of the electronics. So once the ballots are processed, the batches and the images, that'll tell you where all those goes, and it'll also tell you any changes to the software, any updates, algorithms that were in place, and that's all present at the code level, and that's really what these companies have balked at, providing access to the code, because they say that that's their intellectual property, and it's they've been successful at preventing folks from
Like the government
analyzing the
steal
code.
your intellectual
So
property.
they're utilizing their system for our elections, but it's their property.
And counties and states have signed up for that.
Thank you.
Senator Borelli,
Thank
final
you, Mr.
question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Colonel, just for clarity, not only can these machines be manipulated with a thumb drive and everything else, it can be changed remotely outside the voting center.
That's correct, and there are references in the user's manual that show how they can do that.
Thank
I
you.
know this might seem a little drawn out. even
Mayor
for myself,
Giuliani, anything else with
but
your
these
witness
people
here?
need to understand these things.
All right.
This is what
Think we
they
covered
need to
everything?
know. This is not
Thank you,
for
sir.
us.
Do you have a
them.
next witness? I'm looking at the clock, and I know that we've got a time management issue with one of our witnesses.
Yes, I think we should call Anna Orth.
I'm
Okay.
going
Because
to try
she
and
has an
switch over to
appointment,
Diamond
and
and Silk
we'll
only
call her first.
because.
Okay, and then after that, Senator
had
Pat
issues with,
Colbeck, we need to make sure that we have
Yes,
him at
sir.
the airport
RC
by
on
1
Twitter,
o'clock.
but it
All right,
has a
thank you
better
very much.
picture, So hang on a second, guys.
Anna Horth?
I've been waiting for a break to do this, so we can get to the.
Colbeck. We
Is
need to
Anna
make sure
Orth
that we
here?
have
Yes,
him
sir.
at the airport by 1 o'clock. All right, thank you very much. Anna Horth? Anna
Or
Horth.
TH.
Anna Horth. Okay, just get him out here as they call him.
Is Anna Orth here?
Anna Horth? Anna
Or
Horth.
TH.
Anna Horth.
All right, we'll check on her. And let's go then to,
All right, Senator Pat Colbeck. Just so folks know that we've got folks in a separate room, just so that we can bring them out and have some kind of order here. Senator Colbeck. Thank you, sir. If you would, could you please introduce yourself?
No masks.
Yes, my name is former Michigan State Senator Patrick Kolbeck. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Mr. Chair, and esteemed panel members. For 8 years, I was sitting on the other side of this testimony. I was where you were sitting, and hopefully I'll be able to provide kind of a unique perspective on what to look out for in this election. If you excuse me, I'm going to try to get my presentation up here and get that going. Kick it up.
Yeah, technology's great until you want to use it.
It's more difficult when you can't see. Nice job on the resolution of the screen here, by the way. Okay. And just for background purposes, as we're looking for it to recognize my USB flash drive.
Robin says the tech details may sound boring, but you need to understand networking, and the details are horrifying.
Of course, the USB is not working, because that's what happens with USBs. In the most secure election ever, all these
There we go.
USBs blowing all over the place, throwing cards, USBs.
Much better.
At your grandma. And every voting machine known to mankind. We're just gonna pump these puppies in there, load us up some votes,
Et voila.
handing them out like
Okay.
Christmas candy.
Oh, we still don't have it on the screen yet. Ah, there we go.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
And if
Chris
you
Kobach.
would, please put it in play mode so we can see it. All right, please proceed.
All right, thank you very much. It was a perfect compliment, I think, to Colonel Waldron's testimony here because kind of got a unique experience regarding this whole election process. First of all, I am a former Michigan State Senator. I served on the Michigan Senate Elections and Government Reform Committee. I took those duties very seriously to the point of diagramming out all of our election processes, so I had a pretty good understanding of how elections were supposed to work from a book perspective. But another perspective that's useful to this discussion is that something that I couldn't do while I was running for office is actually, I served as a poll challenger in Detroit at the AV Counting Board for the election day from 5 p.m. through the next day into the evening of the following day on November 4th. So I was actually at the Detroit AV Counting Board, so you may have heard about all the things that happened there, all the cardboard up on the windows. Yes, I was there. I was one of the people blocked from returning back into the Detroit AV Counting Board, so I could resume my duties as poll challenger. I was up training our next batch of poll challengers as to what they need to look out for and what we had been seeing. And coincidentally, by the way, that was when they were counting the military ballots, which, just so you guys know, that's when they duplicate the ballots, because the military ballots come in a format that's different from those that can be read by these tabulators. And if you don't have a Republican and a Democrat watching that, it's ripe for malfeasance, if you will, and that's exactly what happened. So along with that background, I'm actually a certified Microsoft small business specialist. In addition to being that, I actually did cabling design the International Space Station, so I have no problem working with technology, so it's kind of a unique background, and just so happened that I was right there on the Detroit AV Counting Board on the night of the election. So I'm going to focus in on just highlight 3 areas of the diagram that Colonel Waldron just showed you, because that's important for everybody to understand. For people on the ground, these are the key pieces of technology. He talked about ImageCast Central. That's the equipment that I witnessed out at the Detroit AV Counting Board. It features a high-speed scanner and a workstation associated with it. These were networked in turn with adjudicator machines, which anything that was rejected by the high-speed scanner would go over to this adjudicator machine. That was part of the absentee ballot counting suite, if you will, for Dominion. In addition, they had something that was called Local Data Center, where all the election officials would work from a central computer workstation with a series of laptops, et cetera, that were connected to the rest of these computers. We'll get into that a little bit later here. But that ImageCast Central area is one of the key pieces of, or key systems, if you will, that are on the ground for the absentee ballots in particular. If you're at an in-person polling location, you'll have the ImageCast precinct set up, and that's on the right-hand side of this diagram. Up on the top is kind of the local data center and the kind of the eye in the sky, the overarching look at what's going on with the election. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. And as you guys know, Dominion voting systems was used here in Arizona in Maricopa County, and they were using some of the same equipment we were just talking about in regards to ImageCast Precinct and also ImageCast Central, that Can's the scanner there. So I said that I was in your position before, right? So if I were in your position, these are kind of some of the key questions I would be asking in regards to all that we're hearing about this testimony regarding this election. Number one, was the chain of custody for the election artifacts broken? And thank you very much, Senator-elect Townsend, for bringing that up. That is a key term for everybody to understand, chain of custody. And we're going to go over a little diagram on specifically where some of my comments are going to focus in on in that chain of custody. All right, and the key is to hit the right arrow. All right, and was there evidence of election fraud? There can be fraud that happens that may not even violate statute, but you know that the intent is there to defraud the election, and they take advantage of loopholes that we have in the law. For example, in Detroit, we know that there was an ability for people to vote both at the poll and absentee. So some people's votes were more important than others. Was there evidence that election statutes were violated? Yeah. In Michigan, we have evidence to suggest that's exactly what happened. Was there evidence of foreign agents with the ability to manipulate the election data and third parties getting access to that data? We believe that we've seen evidence of that as well. But the other thing we need to ask is, well, all right, what are we going to do about it if we see all this happening? And what options do you have as legislators? All right, so let's go to this chain of custody, and I could go into a lot more detail on this chain of custody, but I like to simplify it into just 4 key artifacts: qualified voter file, i.e., who's registered to go off and vote in your state. Number 2, poll book. That's a precinct-specific extract of the data from your qualified voter file. The ballot itself, pretty important artifact, right? But then, in the spirit of the old Stalin quote, it's not he who votes that counts, it's the one who counts the vote that counts. You got to look at the ballot tabulator and how the votes are tallied. And that was my focus when I went to the Detroit AV Counting Board. I was one of those folks that was not specifically assigned to any particular counting station. I was looking at the big picture. And we'll go over what I found here in a sec. First of all, everybody hopefully has seen the idea that there's been a lot of voter anomalies. This is our first clue that something's happened. When you're on the ground, you can see all the things that are happening, you know, onesie, twosie style. You say, hey, wait a minute, that envelope was backdated, or you can see that they adjudicated something in favor of the Democrat instead of the Republican or something like that. That's easy to go off and see, but it's very difficult to see the big picture. That comes out afterwards with experts like Colonel Waldron. And in this case, we first started seeing issues when people were talking about Benford's law being violated. That's actually used in criminal court cases to determine whether or not fraud existed. So that was the first indicator that some of the analyses we've seen flagged that. That's not proof. I mean, it's getting it's telling you that it's you've got something off here that you got to investigate. Then we've seen linear regression analyses that there's a lot of noise in, but it seemed to indicate a pattern of vote distribution that indicated some data manipulation. Then, most recently, we have actually seen folks who believe that they've identified specifically what the algorithm that was used to switch some of the data. So, some other things that were kind of odd, and you don't see while you're necessarily on the ground, but in retrospect, you'll be able to get access to it. This is actually documented as part of the affidavit that was submitted in a lawsuit that's put in Michigan by Sidney Powell and in other states. And you guys have voted quite a bit. You guys are, most of you have already served in office, right? Do you remember any of your votes being tabulated with a decimal point on the back of them? I don't remember any. My 8 years serving in the Michigan Senate, any times where I actually had a decimal point after a vote tally.
So that would suggest that a partial person was voting?
Well, sometimes, you know, there were people that tried to make you feel like a partial person when you served, but no, that wasn't the case here. And so you guys have probably all heard about what I call the little switch, the Antrim County. We've heard testimony on that already today and some of the things that could possibly happen. Getting into the possible technical reasons for that is maybe have an internal ballot barcode switch on it where they have one barcode style or ballot style that's flagged, and then when they associate a specific scan of a vote, they flip it over to a different barcode style that may have the voters or the candidates flipped in it. Something else is something called a rank choice voting algorithm. It's one of the modules inside of the Dominion suite. And this is where you might see evidence of, this is the only place that I know of at least that can start putting in fractions into your vote. Because if you meet a certain vote threshold, it'll go off and switch that, it'll prioritize the votes for the second choice, if you will, and give them 10% of the first choice of whoever, or 10% or whatever number you specify. It'll actually get into the point of allocating percentages of votes to one of the candidates. Another thing is data manipulation via remote access. And another thing to look at as you guys investigate what happened here or didn't happen inside Arizona is take a look at your public accuracy tests. And there are people that, this is usually in Michigan at least, it's specified what the standards are for that by the Secretary of State. And if you don't run all the possible permutations of submit, we're going to show one of the examples of where we believe one of those gaps is that you could maybe flip a vote from a certain candidate to a write-in candidate and preload this with write-in candidates, and we think we have evidence of that happening in Detroit. So if you want to go off and check into this, one of the things you're going to need to do, is look into compact flashcards, event logs, and paper vote tallies. So these tabulator data card, that's where the compact, that's where a lot of the election data we've been wanting to look at is going to be located, so please make sure you get your hands on that. Then we talk about the big switch. I'm not going to get any detail on this. Suffice it to say, in Michigan, our current vote deficit for President Trump is being projected as 154,188 votes. We got more than that we can tie back to potential fraud. So in the state of Michigan, I know a lot of people have written us off in this context, but I tell you, Michigan's in play because of what the level of fraud we've seen. So here's what our Detroit AV Counting Board looked like. And essentially it was set up, so there's 503 precincts in the city of Detroit. They put in 134 of these ImageCast central stations all the way around. That's where the poll books were located. There are about 2 to 5 precincts per ImageCast central unit. We had 5 poll workers per station. Overall, I would submit there was probably less than 10 Republican workers at that whole night sitting at those, and by law we're supposed to have a Republican and a Democrat adjudicating ballots. Here's what I said, that I was looking at the big picture when I got in there. I was looking at the big picture. First question I asked was, one of these chief election officials, his name was Chris Thomas, I said, who I worked with when I was serving in the Senate, I said, how are you going to protect the chain of custody around the tallies of the individual tabulators and your report outs to the county and all points beyond that? So we talked about the idea of this getting reported out to the New York Times. You can see it on CNN and all that kind of stuff. Show me how that chain of custody is protected. And this election official, who was a state elections director in Michigan for 2 decades, said, I don't know. Now this is kind of an important data point, don't you think? And I was badgering him the rest of the night. I said, you know what? He finally acquiesced and said, tell you what, I'll let you know. And then finally, the last statement he had on it, because I was pretty persistent, was saying, you know what, I'm not going to tell you till after tomorrow. And I go, well, you know what the primary duty of a poll challenger is? To make sure that the election process are executed effectively, efficiently, and accurately in transparent manner. He did not allow that to be done. Now, I can see physical transfer of data. I can watch when somebody moves a flash drive from a tabulator to a central station, and I can go off and verify vote counts at that handoff. I can't get inside wires to go off and trace electrons through the Ethernet cables that I saw position, and that's the next point I want to highlight. And this is something important for you to understand here, is how these were connected. A lot of these election officials will swear up and down that none of these machines were connected to the internet. And that's based on propaganda being pushed by companies like Dominion Voting Systems. They will say that they have an air gap. They will say that they have firewalls in place. They have encryption in place. And I hope to demonstrate here that that doesn't mean a heck of a lot. Any hacker worth their salt knows that if one computer is connected to the internet, they're all connected to the internet, firewall or not. And so here's a diagram that I put together based on, this is literally midnight the next night, before I forgot everything. I wanted to make sure I documented everything that was there. I went through and physically traced all the cables from all the tabulators and adjudicators to the local data center at the top. So it's that local data center that we have election officials that did confirm that that was connected to the internet, but they said none of the tabulators or anything else were connected to the internet. I can show physical connection between those tabulator machines, the Ethernet cables, 2 routers or managed switch. It's tough to tell from 12 feet away. But it's a router type of device connected to all the other devices on this network. And as Colonel Waldron pointed out, it's designed to work as a network. And so all these tabulators were connected to one another, all the adjudicators were connected to one another, the local data center that they acknowledged was connected to the internet were connected to these tabulators and adjudicators. So, and so if that wasn't enough, we went around to all the different computers and observed in the bottom right-hand corner of all the computers. I can't do this because it defaults into a certain slide presentation mode, but if you have laptops that are window enabled and you're connected to the internet, you roll over that and you got a Windows 10 device, roll your mouse cursor over in that bottom right-hand corner and you'll see a LAN internet connection icon. And you roll over it, it's going to pop up and say connected to the internet. They wouldn't do that test for me to go off and demonstrate that. Yeah. So guys, it's serious stuff, and I also wanted to highlight, I took a snapshot of what the Wi-Fi connections were at that point in time, and one of them is called AV_connect. I wonder what that was connecting. Part of their spec that they have in the contract with the state of Michigan that are supposed to be connected via Ethernet cables, and they even have cellular-based modems that they can plug into a lot of these items to transfer the data over the internet. They've got a Dominion Tech support manual that says connect it to the Ethernet. There's no denying that this was network connected. And by the way, even if they say it wasn't connected to the internet, in the Detroit AV County Board, I can trace a physical connection that says that the system that was used to tabulate 172,000 plus votes in the state of Michigan was all networked together. So even if it wasn't some guy sitting in an ice shanty in Antarctica connected to the internet, that one guy in the city of Detroit that had access to all that information could modify the votes locally there. And so why does it matter? Well, we already talked about these man-in-the-middle attacks. We talked about, in the Sidney Powell lawsuit that's out there, there's additional exhibits that highlight that these passwords are available on the internet. And when you have a man-in-the-middle attack, you think you're getting the right data, you think you're talking to the right person, but you ain't. You're talking to an in-between guy. We also got NAIST that left a key under the mat. What do I mean by that? All the specs on what files to look for, what their file size is, everything else for the voting system is left up on the internet for everybody to go off and say, I went there myself, I could download this file, took that extract from it. You can find out everything you need to go off and manipulate as a hacker. And we've got Challenger observations on the ground that attest to each and every one of these, and I just want to highlight one of them, the poll worker observation, that he actually observed the fact that the printout of the tape said that there were write-in candidates on it, yet when you actually, he will test in his affidavit that there were no write-in ballots submitted.
Senator Colbeck, we're out of time.
Yep.
So thank you very much for your testimony. We also appreciate the slide deck that you presented, and if you are willing, would you please distribute that to the members of this panel, and I'm sure Mayor Giuliani would like to have it as well.
I will leave a copy for everybody.
Any questions for this gentleman? Thank you very much, Senator. Anna Orth, would you please come up to the witness stand? Thank you for coming, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please give your name, and Mayor, the floor is yours.
Can you get poll worker on November? Would you like me to wrote in because I was aware of some irregularities that happened while I was a poll observer, and some different activity that I just felt uncomfortable with on election day. Was certified prior to that to be able to watch the two people that would be correcting, they were duplicates. when I walked into the room, they said, "I'm sorry, you can't be in here. You're going to go into another room." So I had to walk back to the front desk. I was escorted from that area, and there were 30 to 30 rebels had either a libertarian or someone. There was one table with someone from the Green Party, and then there were 3 or 4 tables at each of those tables. And they worked there at the elections office because when people came in from the building, they talked to them and supervisor, and I let her. And those were then put aside to be counted after the 22nd. My concern was the amount of ballots that were considered to be problematic that would make it in, because when that's a separate issue, but my point is that I don't know if my ballot actually has as I said, that's something separate from what I experienced there as an observer. As a poll worker, I was assigned to be a provisional ballot clerk, and that was on election day. And on that day, I had worked the primary in August, so I had an idea of who would come by, what the issues were. But this time, we had so many more people who needed a provisional ballot than we had been allotted to have a ballot clerk. So, of course, that was somebody that I had to take care of. So I went back in and thought, well, this is unusual. I'm concerned that somebody outside is going to be calling an attorney on something that I did, because I said no. I sent somebody away and said, I'm sorry. I mean, if you don't have any proof that you've lived here or proof of having registered, I can't give you a ballot. So I called the recorder's office and explained this, and she said, well, you have to let them, all votes will count, but it's on a case-by-case basis. So at that point then, I had to call in to the recorder's office at every single ballot, and you have to understand, we ran out of spaces. So, I mean, we were at like 200. I'm sure you can check on this to be sure, but we were over the amount of ballots we had. They would look that up. The person on the phone would say, okay, well, you can go ahead and let them vote. And so I was trying to find a constant that I could go by so that we could speed up the process. I mean, is it if they've moved here and they have this, and if they've moved here at a certain date, what is it? And they would not give me any constant. They just said, you just have to call for every case is different. So my concern and why I wrote in was that I had 2 people right after having a slew of people who came in from other states wanting to vote without having been registered and allowed to vote per the recorder's office. I then had someone come in from Maricopa County and one from Pinal County. It just happened right after. And each of them, when I called in, they said, nope, you're going to have them go back to Maricopa County, and the other one will have to go back to Pinal. And I said, well, how is that this person from Wisconsin and this person from Michigan and this person from Kentucky was able to do that? And she put me on hold for a second and then came back and said, well, it's just that we have their records more accurately than we have for Maricopa. We just can't, we're not able to process a Maricopa County ballot. So I had to send them away. But then as other people were coming through, it made me question why that was happening. So I asked them, do you have information that will prove that you are a resident, that I can verify that you are registered to vote here? And they would pull out their card, and it very clearly said that they were Republican. They had a voter card. So to test this theory out, I called the recorder's office and asked them, and they were denied. I had to deny them. And so I was in a frenzy trying to take care of all of these people, but I found that the discrepancy between every vote counts and only those that the recorder's office would allow was indicative of how they chose who they wanted to allow to vote. And there was
This is amazing.
consistency in the voter
At the end, 'cause I missed
preference
part of it, 'cause
that they chose. And that concerned me because by the end of the night, which was at 8:15, after we counted all of the votes and they got put in the box and we were waiting for someone to come get them, I'm in the car and the election was already counted for Arizona, which I found appalling. First of all, after working 15 and a half hours taking in votes, but
40 people
the
came from one
experience
address at an
really
apartment
led me to believe that
One
it
address.
was not
registered.
there should have been a system that we could have followed, because I understood that registered voters ended on a certain date and you couldn't come in and vote, but I was having to allow people to vote that literally had just moved here.
Literally
Within
had just
2
moved
weeks,
here.
3 weeks.
2
And they
weeks,
were
3
all
weeks.
from 2 different, not all of them, I take that back. There was a large majority, a large percentage of people who had addresses from 2 apartment complexes. And the last thing is that I had a homeless man who came in with a registration. And the reason I know he's homeless is because I said, "Where do you live?" And he said, he didn't speak English, and he said, "I don't have a home, but when I was at a shelter, they registered me at the recorder's office." So when I called about it, and they said, "Well, he was probably registered to be in this precinct." And I said, "But he doesn't live here." And they go, "Well, it's anybody who was registered downtown can vote." And so I found that to be odd. And last week, for work, I was on the other side of town, and I saw this gentleman on the south side of Tucson with his shopping cart. And I swung into the parking space and called him and just said, "Hi, can I talk to you?" And when he saw me, he ran off, for who knows why. But my point is these are the kind of people that had apparently permission to vote in a precinct that was literally 25 miles away because they had a voting card that was given to them from downtown. That it was a downtown precinct that allowed him to vote here. So my point is that if somebody from Pinell County and Maricopa County can't vote, how is it that in this precinct, how is it that a homeless man from another area of the town and also people from other states were able to get permission to vote? And that was concerning to me, and that's why I'm here.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions specific to this witness?
Sure.
Please proceed.
A couple of, try to.
Just to give you a marker on time, it's 12:02.
So you were there for 16 and a half hours, Ms. Orth?
On election day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And you were supposed to work with the ballots that were being examined?
I was working with the voters, the ballots of voters who were not able to walk into the precinct to vote normally on a ballot. So some of them came to me saying, "It says that I got an early ballot and I never got it." Others said, it doesn't even say that I'm on there. It says that I've already voted, or I'm not allowed to vote here. Those were the kind of.
So these were ballots that had difficulties?
Yes.
And there were 28 or 35 people that were looking at those ballots that you had to observe?
No, that was, okay, I just described to you my experience as a poll worker on election day. Those 30 people that I mentioned earlier were when I was a poll observer on the 16th of October at the elections office in Pima County.
And you were unable to see what they were doing?
It was a room as big as almost maybe half the size of this banquet room. And I was an observer watching 30...
As far away as we are?
I could walk behind them. I could walk behind them, but I couldn't walk behind 35 people at the same time.
And what were they doing?
They were taking them out of the envelope. They had been brought in from the recorder's office where the ballot had been opened. The envelope had been opened, and according to what I was told, the signature had already been checked in another room.
But you didn't see the signature check?
No, I didn't get to see that. They would take these out and they would take...
Did you ask to see it?
Yes, and I was not allowed...
And were you refused?
Yes. So they said, and I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody, but as I said before, I could talk to the supervisor. These people who sat at each of these tables, who were representative of mostly one party, with the Democrat Party, and they would take them out of the envelope and then put them in a pile, and then separate the inside envelope. In Arizona, we have an outside envelope, then the inside envelope, and then the ballot, right?
Right.
So the ballot was then collected from the bin. So each table would get a bin, and they would separate them, put the ballots in a pile, put the envelopes in a rubber band, put them to the side, and then mark that they had such and such amount of regular ballots and such and such amount of duplicates, problematic ballots, that then had to be taken to a table, and they would separate those, take the duplicates, mark them, put them at a table, which were then taken to the original room where I had been ushered out of. Not that I was not to help them.
In a room that you were excluded from, they examined the signatures?
Yes. No, they started examining the signatures, then were moved to this room. And then from this room, they were then piled to then be tabulated later.
Did they do a further examination of the signatures?
No, not in this room. The
So
only room that was done in this...
You observed no examination of signatures, and they refused to let you do that?
Right, I was only allowed to watch these people put these in piles. So when I was ushered back
So
out...
how many ballots do you think, just a rough estimate, how many ballots, 1,000, 100, 2,000?
I would say each box had between 200 and 250 ballots. And I was there for 5 hours. And during that time that I was there, each table went through 6 to 7 to 8, depending on how fast they were and how many mistakes they made, because many times the ballots weren't straight and they had to recount them, or I would hear them say...
So how do we do that arithmetic?
All right, well, let's see, 250 times 8. Somebody who's not nervous maybe can say...
2,000.
That's per table, and there were about 16 to 17 tables of 2 people doing this at the same time.
So as I best understand this, there were 2,000 ballots times 17 tables.
Yes.
That you or anyone else that you knew of got a chance. No Republican got a chance to observe that, as far as you know.
Well, I was the only observer allowed in at one time. So a gal took over for me at 1 o'clock when I left, and I told her, I'm exhausted. I don't know how you can watch all 17, but stand behind one of the tables, and you'll see that this particular table keeps folding them and tearing them, and once that happens, it has to become a duplicate. And when this becomes a duplicate, it goes to that table, and it goes to the room where we don't get to see what happens to that. So
that's it.
You can't talk to them, but you can do this and tell them, look, that's folded or that's
rip
crooked.
them on
or,
purpose
and
to
I said,
go
you see
to
one
change
again
it.
that has
Trump,
a pencil
rip,
on it.
Trump,
The supervisor is
rip,
saying that yes,
Trump,
she told
rip.
me specifically that it could go through. I mean, told me that it couldn't, but told them that it could. So I said, there's some discrepancy in what she's telling me and what she's telling them. So, just do your
all
best
levels,
to try
baby.
to keep an eye on this particular table is doing this.
And how are
that
you supposed to
particular
have
table when I
multiple
walk by
witnesses
is
when
doing
she was
that.
the only
That one over there has a
Republican
King
allowed
County
in?
worker on it, and she works here with them. And there's no Republican at that table, so it's very concerning. And so
it sure
that
is.
was the. So when I was
She
ushered
saw
out, they
problem
came specifically
ballots,
twice to me.
but she didn't get them
and
resolved.
said, please don't talk to anybody, and you cannot leave on your own. Make sure that when it's time, what time do you have to leave so we can walk you out? When they walked me out, the gentleman said, I hope everything went well. And I said, well, I'm concerned because here they were, You know, my only concern is the handling of the ballots, which makes them ineligible to go through the machine correctly. But it's the room before me and the room after me it's a concern. I don't get to see who.
Well, let me ask you about that.
Room before,
So,
room after.
a certain number of ballots were now put aside as duplicates.
Yes.
Duplicates means that they had a problem.
Yes, that they have to be duplicated.
Right.
So,
It didn't mean there were 2 ballots.
right, that's what they
Duplicates
called
can
them.
sound like 2 ballots. What
Right.
it meant was, there's something wrong with it, and therefore we may have to duplicate.
Signatures?
Yes, and that's the room that I was originally
And they were put aside,
put aside,
and they were
taken
brought
out.
into another room,
There's 2
and
people.
you were not allowed to go in there.
No, I was not allowed to go back there.
So you were cut off from that also.
Yes, I was specifically
You were cut off from
taken
observing
out.
the problem ballots.
Yes, I was specifically taken out of that room, ushered out.
When
and brought
specifically
into
she
this
should
room,
be there
which
for the
really was
problem.
Just
Ballots.
the room, as I explained.
That's at least
And how many
30,000
could
ballots.
you estimate that is?
Each table would have an average of, I would say maybe 1/16 of the pile, so, you know, let's say an average of maybe 10 to 20 ballots, but by the time I left, these bins were filled. They would fill them, they would go correct them, or whatever it is that they did, and brought them back.
Best estimate.
I would say my guess would be close to, in the day that I was there, just in 5
yeah.
hours, maybe 2,000 ballots.
Okay.
Yeah, but
And you had a sense that when there was problems with ballots or whether someone should vote or not, the choices that were being made would allow people that appeared to be voting for Biden and the Democrats to vote and declining those who appeared to be people who might be voting for Trump or the Republicans.
well, yes, I began to get that sense after I saw that people from other states who weren't even registered in the state of Arizona were being allowed to vote. I was given direction that I had to give them a provisional ballot because as they walked out, there was a gentleman out there who told me he was specifically there to make sure that every voter who wanted to vote could vote. And so that was on election day though, Mr. Giuliani, that's not on the observant,
Right,
the dad.
I got it,
Okay.
I got it.
And on that day, that was happening, and then when I would get a voter who was from another
I'm just at the witnesses. I have to take
county.
them with you. I'm sorry. How am I
and
going to
had
talk
some
to you
indication,
people? I'm so
sometimes they had a
frustrated.
shirt
I wish they did the
that
second.
Well, you might
either
get back at
said
the tail
Trump
end.
on
You're
it
supposed to go
or
till 2,
they-
which gives you an hour and 45 minutes to get back. I
showed
won't
me
be
their
back.
voter card.
In an hour and 45 minutes?
And said, you know,
You won't be back in
they
a
gave
I'll
me some
stay on until you
indication
get here.
that they
I want to be with them for all the
were a Trump
witnesses.
voter, and I had to call on them, like I did for every single person that came in.
Gotta work.
To the recorder's office, and I was told to send them away. And so it was at that point that I started to see that this can't be right. This can't be right. So I tested this and
No, it can't
asked
be
her,
right.
and then especially as I
Glad you
said,
recognize that.
yeah, and so when I said, you all live at this apartment complex, and you all live at this other one, and they said, well, yeah, we have to, we're all coming in to vote, and so I said, well, how long have you lived here? Or is your other precinct here? Well, I've lived here, I've lived there, and they still were allowed to vote. Many of them were not residents for more than a month. Other people said they were registered in another state, but that they were here. And then, as I said, I think the nail in the coffin for me was when this poor little old homeless man, and I speak Spanish, so I spoke to him and said, how are you here? And he said, I was told to come vote. I want to vote. And I said, okay. Well, where do you live? And he goes, well, I lived in a shelter downtown. Well, downtown is 15 miles from where I live, so
Right.
I'm sure that's not his precinct. He should be voting
So,
there.
so you thought there were about 2,000 like this, roughly?
I would say easily, just in the 5 hours that I was
Okay.
there, on one specific day, and that was on a Friday, they were going to be counted, they were being collected to be tabulated
One
on
last
Christmas.
question. The gentleman who said he was there to turn Arizona blue,
Yes, that was.
what was he? What was his official position?
He had a
Was
sign
he an
on.
inspector of some kind?
No, he was a poll observer that was from California. He was from LA. And on a break, I walked out there and I said hello and just walking, and he said hi. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm a poll observer for the Democratic Party. And I'm here. I said, oh. And he goes, the weather's hot here. It's not as hot as it is at home. And I said, well, where are you from? And he said, I'm from California. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I'm here specifically to help turn this precinct blue. This is one of our problem ones. And I said, oh. And as I said to the panel over here, I don't know why he felt comfortable telling me that, but he said, and I said, you came all the way from LA? He goes, no, actually I came from another precinct in Maricopa where it was another one that we were focusing on, and now I'm here.
What was he doing? Was he campaigning? Was he encouraging people to vote for Biden? What activities did he take part in to turn Arizona blue?
Well, as I understood, because I was inside working, his job was to make sure that anybody who was turned away to vote, that he would have people he could call, attorneys in his words. He goes, I have a couple attorneys that I'm connected to right now that if anybody's not allowed to vote, I can make sure that they're represented. And so anybody who was not allowed to vote in that polling place, I was the one that they would be talking to. So of course, that was somewhat directed at me, since I'm the one who would say, no, you can't vote. So I don't know what else he was doing, but he said there was a group of them that were coming in.
They sent him there sometime after you began doing that?
He was there, well, we started at 5 o'clock in the morning, just getting ready. So when I went out for a break, it was maybe around 10 o'clock, and he had been there. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what he had on his shirt, but they were very clear that they had T-shirts, they said, that they matched. Another person came in to take over for him, and it was a yellow shirt with something written on the front.
Well, thank you very much for your service and for your courage in testifying. I just make one point, Mr. Chairman. Her testimony alone, and I see no reason why she isn't telling the truth. By the way, she is under oath in the sense that she submitted an affidavit under penalties of perjury to what she just testified to.
Thank you, sir.
34,000 votes unobserved would change the nature of the election. Just her testimony.
Indeed it would.
One witness.
Sir, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Members, I know everybody wants to ask a question. We need it, well, everybody has one. It is now 12:15. I expect this hearing, at the rate that we're going, we will be here until late into the night. Please be brief with your question, and I would appreciate it if there's no follow-ups, just so that we can have a lunch break and kind of set the expectation for the folks who are here and get back at it.
And we'll try to make the witnesses focus a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leo Biasucci, I'm sorry, Representative Biasucci, you're first, and then Mr. Burley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Anna, for being here. Just a quick question about the voters that you said were coming in that were from out of town, or they just moved there, whatever their reasoning was. Did they have an Arizona ID with an address or anything to show you? Were they on the voter rolls, or were these?
They were not on the voter rolls. They had out-of-state driver's licenses, but had either an electric bill or some kind of a bill that they showed me on their phone, showed me that they lived in this particular precinct. With that, I would call the recorder's office.
And you would verify through them that they were indeed legal to vote.
Right. And so then when I said, well, when did you move here? Well, I moved here on such and such a date, but you had to have registered, I think, in Arizona by the 15th, and then it was extended to the 22nd or the 23rd. So it was just questionable that they were still allowed to vote, but
Sure.
I had a longtime voter who wasn't allowed
Who
to
wasn't
vote from
allowed.
another precinct, and yet someone could vote from another state.
Perfect, thank you.
Senator Borelli?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. When the votes that needed to be duplicated, the ones that need to be corrected, when they went to the end of the room, did you notice anybody in there that was actually overseeing that correction, a Republican or a Democrat?
No, as I mentioned before, that's the first room I went into, and he explained to me that this is the room where that would happen, but that I was not allowed to be in there.
When you were in there before they sent you somewhere else, did you
Yes.
see a Republican and a Democrat
No, he was
observe?
alone. He was, no. it
Only
was
one.
just one
And
person.
do you know how he was registered? Do you know if he's a registered Republican or Democrat?
I don't know, but I have an idea, but that would
Okay,
be.
well, bottom line is.
We'd appreciate no speculation. Thank you very much.
What's a violation of the law anyway? Because you're supposed to have both. Thank you.
All right, members, one question, and then we're going to break for lunch. Representative Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Leah,
And
they're
I
gonna
just have
break
a
for
really
lunch.
quick question. We had our county recorder in Maricopa County instruct voters to cross out mistakes on their ballots for the November election, and then we later had a judge say, no, that was likely breaking the law. You can't do that. We've also heard from adjudicators saying that they had seen a full Republican ballot all the way down, but that President Trump's name was crossed out and the other candidates was circled in. Is it possible, in your opinion, in that other room that you weren't allowed to be in when there wasn't a second person watching the adjudication, were there pins allowed? Would someone be able to cross out one candidate and vote for someone else?
Well, again, I wasn't in there to be able to say this accurately, but there's only, can make an assumption. If a room requires two people and an observer, that a person by themselves, it's possible, of course it's possible, that that's what happened. But those are the kind of ballots that I'd see. Because I was able to see them as they came through in this room. They were either all for GOP or all for the Democratic Party. But one of the president little oval had been marked off, or not marked, crossed, which makes it a problematic ballot.
Wow.
So that would have to go into the other room that you're asking me about. And again, I wasn't in there to be able to speak accurately about what this person could have done or didn't do. And that to me was the problem in this whole issue. I'm useless to be able to watch people just putting them in order. We should have had an observer watching.
Okay,
these
thank
corrected
you.
ballots.
All right, Ms. Orth, thank you very much for your testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, here's how we're going to manage the lunch break. As you leave, please wait a minute before you walk out the door or you won't get back in. As you're walking out the door, you'll be given an armband, and in order to come back in, you'll have to show that armband. We are going to break. It's now 12:22. We will be back here at 1 o'clock. It's going to be a short break. Thank you.
So it's only going to be a half hour. A little over a half hour. So let me mute this. I'll just let it kind of hang out there and play in the background. I'm not going to sit here with you guys for a half hour. I've been here for a while. I've been sitting in this chair for 4 hours, aside from the little break that I took to eat a cookie and some milk. If I had known they were going to do a lunch break, I would have waited and done my own little lunch break. But a couple of points I want to hit, and then we will restream this back again at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This guy is anticipating them going well into the evening. I hope not, but if it is, I guess we'll bring the whole thing to you. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I hope it doesn't go that long. But I wanted to hit 2 points here. Well, maybe there might be more than two. She was saying right there at the very end, her job as a poll watcher is supposed to be able to observe all of the ballots. There's never a reason for a credentialed poll watcher not to be able to view any process of the ballot and it being counted and stuff. That's their job, to be there to ensure that this is all being done on the up and up. So the fact that she was excluded and any other Republican, there should have been more than one Republican, by the way, she was trying to monitor 17 tables. Okay, there should have been a Democrat and a Republican at each one of those 17 tables. I don't know why there wasn't, but there wasn't. So there's my pillow guy. Secondly, so now there's two different areas that we are identifying here where there was specifically no security and oversight. The first one is the 1.9 million ballots that there was no signature. Here, I'm just going to shrink this down here. That's kind of distracting, isn't it? Signature comparison on, right? So that's number one. Number two, there's a breach of the chain of custody or security or authenticity or whatever words you want to use when we're looking at these ballots, and there is not a Democrat and a Republican able to identify them. The fact that she mentioned, listen to this, guys, she mentioned that they were folding and ripping ballots so that they would have to go into, I'm going to call it the problem pile. That's fraud. I don't care if it looks like, oops, or, oh, I just folded this or whatever. And then she said like a 16th of each pile was needing to go into the duplication process where, okay, we're going to just take a scan of this. Now, this all ties together because it's important to have the witness testimony, and it was very important to have the colonel's testimony that was so lengthy and so detailed at the beginning of, okay, so she's got these problem ballots. We know that the problem ballots can all be put into a specific folder that can then just be dumped. Now, we've been seeing in other states where sworn affidavits have happened where these are the possibility of taking that, I forget the name of it, I should have written it down, that folder of the problem ballots, and they could actually duplicate it. And that's why we were seeing a lot of times where these spikes in the numbers would be the exact same number, like, 3,284 again and again, because they were just duplicating it again. So I think that this hearing so far is going really well. I know you may have been questioning, I don't think Leah obviously couldn't say anything about it, why have the witness guy from Michigan come? Well, he was also offered, the one with the PowerPoint, and I had to leave for part of that, but it's important to see how, and his PowerPoint gave you the how, and I thought that that was really important. So anyway, we will take our own break here. Y'all take your own break. You probably don't need a break because if you're like me, when I listen to YouTube, I'm doing stuff around the house, which is difficult for Leah and I to sit down here with you guys, because normally if I wasn't streaming this live to you, I would be putting up my Christmas decorations, which I got halfway done last night. And I wanted to be working on today. It's snowing here. We have our first snow. And I had made my plans that we were going to do this early in the day. And I figured it would be done at a reasonable time. And then I would spend the rest of the day finishing my Christmas decorations and listen to Christmas music and ho, ho, ho and all that. But instead, it looks like I'll be here spending it with you guys. I keep looking out the window at the snow because it's exciting to have our first snow. So, all right, I'm going to sign off. And I will set up a second stream. I will relabel this one as part 1. And then I will set up immediately right now before I go upstairs and set up part 2. So you can jump right into, if you're watching on YouTube anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, you can jump right into the chat. If you're on Periscope or Twitter, or you are on Facebook, you'll just have to keep an eye out for when we do start streaming live. They said it will be at, I think 1 o'clock their time. So 3 o'clock our time. So in exactly 1/2 hour. So take a 30-minute break, go outside, do some jumping jacks, get the blood flowing, But like I said, you guys are probably actually doing things around your house like I would like to be doing, but this is too important. This is huge. Now we are going to hear from Eric Metaxas. No. Oh shoot, what's his name? Not Eric Metaxas. The guy that did the data. Shoot, I can't remember his name. That's terrible. You won't want to miss it because this is going to be his kind of big debut of what they have discovered in their big findings. So, all right. We love you guys. God loves you. God bless. See you back in a little bit.
I was cold all alone, no place for home, every day so afraid, but you called my name.